Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
And members of the public, thank you for joining me today as we look at my proposed budget for 2020. I want to first take a moment to thank all the city employees who helped develop the 2020 budget for their time and expertise over the past several weeks, especially our finance and communication teams. As you can imagine, a lot of time, effort, and expertise goes into developing the city's budget each year, and rightfully so. The budget process is one of the most important functions that we perform as a council in our roles as policymakers and appropriators. As the mayor, my guidance to the directors was to be intentional with the city's vision statement, taking care of today for a better tomorrow, when developing their budgets. Digging into the budget proposal, you will find we are placing a heavy emphasis on the core essentials while also setting the city up for future success and sustainability. Being good stewards of taxpayer dollars is one of our most important duties as elected officials. Every day, the city collects dollars from residents and visitors in return for the services of local government. And I may be biased, but I believe Sioux Falls does an excellent job delivering on its end of the arrangement. Hundreds of city employees work hard 365 days a year to keep us safe, to maintain our roads and traffic flow, to beautify our community with parks, provide arts, buildings, provide safe drinking water, reliable sanitary sewer, and so much more. As our city grows in size and population, so does the needs of our community. As technology advances, so do the expectations of our residents for our city to adapt. And as new challenges emerge, so does the focus on programs and policies. In the face of our growth and the rapidly changing world around us, my administration is focused on putting our citywide vision of taking care of today for a better tomorrow into action. It should come as no surprise to active followers of local Sioux Falls government that One Sioux Falls provided the framework to develop the 2020 budget. The core tenets of safety and health, accessible housing, workforce, and engaging people, along with a focus on innovation and foundational growth, are at the core of this budget proposal. It should also come as no surprise that many of the priorities using new dollars go toward specific One Sioux Falls big, hairy, audacious goals, or what we call BHAGs, that have been communicated to the council and the public during the past year. I'll talk specifics on those in a few moments. As a reminder, the One Sioux Falls framework was launched to be transparent with the public and community about the focus and priorities of my administration. At the core of the One Sioux Falls concept is the desire for unity and collaborative problem solving. The framework also sets the strategy for my administration's policies and strategic goals, such as our BHAGs. This is our strategic plan, and we are executing to it. The proposed budget is also influenced heavily by a Maslow's hierarchy-style look at the role and priorities of municipal government that our administration has established. At its base is infrastructure. The basic physiological needs of a community, like transportation, networks of roadways, safe drinking water for consumption, reliable networks for electricity, storm drainage, sanitary sewer, trash collection, and more. Next is safety and health. The safety and health needs of our communities include police, fire rescue, ambulance, emergency management, public health for all. They all fall under this tenet. Livability includes the amenities that foster the physical and mental well-being for all residents. This includes parks, bike trails, rec centers, pools, etc. Finally, culture encompasses the investments, programs, and facilities that contribute to the well-being of our residents, but are tailored towards specific areas of interest. And of course, sound planning policies harnessing innovation and technology and fostering economic development opportunities are essential to execute the priorities at all levels of this hierarchy. As you review the budget and hear from members of my administration during budget hearings, you will find the funding percentages are also reflective of their importance to this hierarchy. It is important to note that everything in this hierarchy relates to quality of life. Yet so often we fall into the trap of defining livability and culture as quality of life items. In actuality, infrastructure and safety form the bedrock of government's function at the local level and our quality of life. The city has done a good job of keeping pace with growth, but our list of needs to provide the foundational services and infrastructure needs of our city are a challenging one, as the needs list often exceeds the available funding and the workforce capacity. Sacrificing the infrastructure and safety needs of a growing city like Sioux Falls to prioritize livability and culture initiatives is not sound policy and responsible stewardship for the residents and taxpayers of our city. And that is exactly what I have heard from constituents over the past year. As we began the budget development process for 2020, we went through the standard process of comparing baseline budgets to determine inflationary changes for programs that needed to carry over and cyclical expenses like elections and GIS aerial map updates, things like that. But when it came to new budget item requests, we took a different approach this year. The Finance Department, under Sean Pritchett's leadership, implemented what we called RFRs, or Request for Results. This RFR process required all new appropriation requests, including new employee requests, to submit a proposal outlining how the request aligns with the One Sioux Falls framework that you see on the screen, the return on investment for the taxpayer, and the measurable data available to justify the public value of the request. Next, a team of mid-managers and directors reviewed and scored these RFRs. The RFRs were then brought to a group of residents for their review and their scoring. This year, we chose the Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce Leadership Sioux Falls class. At the same time, we sent out a message to residents on social media asking for their input on budget priorities. We had thousands of engagements, hundreds of suggestions on both the city's social media channels as well as my own personal Facebook page. The message from all those RFR scores and the general public feedback sent a very clear message. Focus on the essentials, specifically infrastructure and safety. The need to inject more dollars into the infrastructure of Sioux Falls in a fiscally responsible manner is no small task. Baselines and existing policies and programs were scrutinized. We also examined ways to be more efficient with dollars instead of spending more dollars, thus maximizing taxpayer investments for greater public value. All of our departments also participated in a budget reduction exercise to be prepared in the event of an economic downturn. Some of the economic efficiencies realized from that exercise have been incorporated into the budget in front of you. Others involve harsh cuts that I hope we never have to make, but we are prepared to if the need arises. Ahead of the budget cycle, we also took the initiative to retire 9 loans totaling nearly $4 million early. Retiring these debt payments early saves the Sioux Falls utility customers in future interest payments and also frees up the city's borrowing capacity. Going into this budget and ahead of the bond that is going to be presented to the City Council in the next year, we also evaluated the city's outstanding debt, as you can see on the screen. You can also see that we are extremely low in our debt per capita comparison compared to our peer cities. And we are well below the threshold set by our debt policy. This is a slide that we can all be very, very proud of. In 2020, we are forecasting $545.8 million in revenues. On the expense side, I am recommending a $545.4 million budget. $247.3 million for operating, $207.9 million for capital, and $90.2 million for internal services. This growth is based on forecasted sales tax growth of 4%, along with population growth. With growing demands on services and inflationary cost increases, our baselines have increased, and there are limited new dollars available for new programs and projects, as well as employee additions. That being said, for next year, the administration is requesting 20 employee additions to carry out important roles for our citizens. I'll highlight some of these specific employee requests a little later on. As you can see, these employee additions keep the city consistent with last year's FTE per 10,000 resident ratio of 66. I want you to just pause on this slide for a little bit and soak that one in. We operate a very efficient government in Sioux Falls. The total proposed capital program is $776.5 million, an increase of approximately $28 million. Of this total, $171.7 million will be budgeted in 2020. The biggest change for this program is a significant addition of dollars toward highways and streets. I am proposing that 80% of the available sales and use tax be dedicated to repairing and reconstructing our highways and streets, the highest proportion in the past decade. The result is an additional $30 million during the next 5 years for highway and street investments. I am also proposing to front-end load this allocation by dedicating 83% of the available sales and use tax after debt obligations to highway and streets in 2020, up from 75% just a year ago. To put $30 million into perspective, $1 million put towards roadway projects allows the city to address 10 blocks of asphalt full reconstruction on streets that are rated very, very poor. 28.5 blocks of thick overlay or full depth replacement on poorly rated roads. 50 blocks of thin overlay for good pavement condition roads, or 333 blocks of residential streets rated very good, but in need of new surface as maintenance. Highway and street projects are expensive endeavors, but valued at over $1 billion, our street system is the largest, highest valued, and most critical asset of our city. We have a responsibility to move the needle with additional dollars. Our residents expect better roads, and I'm prepared to make the tough decisions to address what I believe to be one of the top drivers of resident satisfaction. During the next 5 years, we have an aggressive list of reconstruction projects, rehabilitation, and expansion efforts throughout the city. It's time to catch up on some much-needed repairs, and I hope the council will support this direction. There are two specific projects I'm going to highlight today. First, the historic and iconic 8th Street Bridge in downtown will be rehabbed in 2020 and return to its glory. The structural integrity will be enhanced, and additional lighting features will make the bridge a focal point of downtown at all times of the day and tie in beautifully with the newly installed Arc of Dreams. Next, the city will provide the infrastructure needed for the Sioux Falls School District to open the Ben Rifle Middle School and Jefferson High School. Jefferson will be the biggest financial lift. With a price tag of $4.7 million, we will reconstruct and expand Marion Road north of Madison Street to provide a more modern urban roadway to serve this new school. There is also a large allocation for enterprise fund projects like water purification, water reclamation, landfill, and light and power. These areas will need $346.8 million in enterprise funds for 2020 to 2024. A large portion of this, Council, as you can expect, is for the water reclamation system and plant expansion. I want to thank my Council colleagues for your past support of the water reclamation project. Tomorrow we'll actually break ground on the new lift station where 90% of our city's wastewater will eventually pass through. Even while taking on the largest capital project in the city's history, we have already approved a funding plan that will maintain Sioux Falls' status as one of the most affordable and competitive water and water reclamation providers in the region. A great win for the future of our city and its customers. As a result of shifting additional dollars towards more roadway needs, my administration had to heavily scrutinize other areas of the capital program to make difficult decisions. As a result, there will be fewer dollars towards some park projects. Certain projects have been scaled down and some policies have changed. In future years, as the economy grows and we catch up on road construction needs, we can restore some or all of these dollars to the Parks and Recreation section of the CIP. Still, we have more dollars going toward park CIP projects during the next 5 years than in past CIP 5-year plans. Keeping with the theme of maintaining what we have and catching up, we are increasing the dollars in this budget for parks repair and maintenance. During the most recent recession, when tough cuts were felt across the city, R&M, or our repair and maintenance budget, they were paused. I am proposing restoring dollars so that we can treat our park system with seed and feed to maintain the turf and keep up with cyclical needs for restrooms, drinking fountains, and other amenities in our parks. Funding for Phase 3 of the River Greenway is also on the horizon for 2020. A bond initiative for several items, including the Greenway, will be presented to the Council either later this year or early next year. Advancing this project in 2020 will be important to achieve significant cost savings and capitalize on ease of access for construction that aligns with the construction and development of the adjacent project at Sioux Steel. We are also making an intentional effort to seek private dollars to invest in our park projects throughout our city. Our goal is to partner with the community groups and philanthropists on legacy projects for the entirety of the city to enjoy. Another overarching theme of the One Sioux Falls framework is embracing innovation. My commitment to innovation is best demonstrated by the creation of the Department of Innovation and Technology, and specifically the new Division of Innovation. This department was created to use data, technology, and collaboration to facilitate new ideas and create operational efficiencies. As noted earlier on the FTE to resident ratio, technology has allowed city employees to operate more efficient and effective. As technology advances further, we will continue to gain even greater efficiencies in work tasks and processes. This department will continue to push Sioux Falls to realize the public value innovative solutions present to improving existing services and preparing the city for emerging technologies. The Department of Innovation and Technology was designed not only to provide support services to the other city departments, but to be a strategic partner with each of them, to maximize their resources and their talents. Collaborative initiatives like a mobile app to report potholes, remote access libraries, text message updates for snow emergencies, these all help create the highest quality of life for the citizens of our city while also building an internal culture of innovation. So far, this department has been a huge success, and that will undoubtedly continue in 2020. This budget contains an employee request for a data analyst. Data drives many of our decisions as an administration. In fact, I often tell my teams, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. The city of Sioux Falls is swimming in data and information, the majority of which is actually publicly available on the open data section of the city's website. But the data is only as useful as our capacity to share it, interpret it, and draw conclusions from it. This data analyst position will partner with all city departments and community partners to facilitate data-driven decisions and the reporting of key performance indicators via the city's dashboard. Each department will enjoy added transparency since this position adds the capacity to disclose more operational data in an automated fashion. The position will also assist in cross-departmental data aggregation and extrapolation. Drawing new conclusions about how one's department's activity can influence another's provides a new way to plan for higher levels of efficiency. A new major item in the operating budget, Council, is being led by our innovation division. And it's the funding for the public transit pilot in early 2020. The Council heard a report from the Transit Core team in mid-July, and we've had great dialogue with many of you on that since. Our transit system is in need of a drastic change to provide a more convenient and reliable service to our residents with expanded hours. And I'm confident this solution can accomplish that. And we'll provide more values to users and the city's budget. It's a true win-win for customers and our taxpayers. For 2020, several of the initiatives you are familiar with are included in the budget. Namely, our work to address the narcotics and addiction issues that loom in our community. I have recommended $100,000 to be set aside for the operations of the Community Triage Center. Please note, the city may not need to spend all these dollars. The city, Minnehaha County, Avera Health, and Sanford Health are currently in discussions on the operations funding for the Triage Center. Due to our contribution of the city annex building as the Triage Center location, I expect a lower annual operating contribution than our other partners. I have met with members of the business and philanthropic community to ask for their contributions in support of this very worthy project. Addiction and mental health are topics a lot of people have a personal connection to and want an effort to put their support behind. These conversations have been a huge success so far. Still, the Triage Center is a critical project and we need to be prepared in case contributions would become unavailable. The police department is proposing an additional community resource officer to focus on mental health and addictions in our community. Mental health challenges is often a trigger for addiction issues, but it's also a challenge for suicidal subjects in our city. This resource officer will work to build relationships with residents who are at risk for suicide and those who need assistance getting access to treatment and care. In doing so, we complement the police department's strong enforcement efforts with empathy and resource assistance for those addicted to narcotics. This is important because we know we cannot arrest our way out of an addiction problem. Our continued efforts to investigate, arrest, and prosecute the suppliers and dealers of narcotics is also found in this budget. As you may recall, last year we added a street-level narcotics crime unit dedicated to working with residents in neighborhoods who are suspicious of drug-related activity in their area. This year, an additional narcotics sergeant will also be added to the force in a revenue-neutral way from the department's current budgeting authority. I also want to take a moment to commend our police for their dedication and professionalism. This year, the city has encountered a higher level of reported gunshots fired. Thanks to the professionalism of our team, these suspects are known to investigators, and we are saturating neighborhoods to keep a watchful eye to hopefully deter crime and hold the bad actors in our community accountable for their criminal actions. Thank you. Our police department has the resources they need to tackle this challenge and many others. Crime is probably the most unfortunate result of a growing city. Our crime rates remain consistent with our community growth, and that's important to note as we authorize 4 new patrol officers to keep pace with these population trend growths. The police department is also excited to partner with the State Department of Public Safety and Dakota State University on a shared investigator to patrol the dark web. Housed out of the Fusion Center here in Sioux Falls, this digital intelligence analyst will assist law enforcement in the region and the state to combat cybercrime. This is a great partnership in our city's entry into the digital investigative space, which is an emerging area of need for cities all across our nation. Finally, this budget also authorizes the lease of a report-to-work station for the police on the southwest part of Sioux Falls. Based on the volume of calls, population growth, and distance to the downtown law enforcement center, this area is ideal to pilot a report-to-work location. Here, officers will start their day with a sergeant briefing, get their car in gear, log and secure evidence, and eventually end their shift. Efficiencies and response time and employee well-being gains are expected, as well as alleviations on the space constraints at our current law enforcement center. In the next 6 to 12 months, the city will bring a bond to the council that contains funds for a new public safety training center. We've discussed in detail over the past year the need to retire the current center and provide our police and fire rescue teams a modern facility so they are afforded the necessary facilities to train for today's public safety needs. Also included in this bond is the construction of Fire Station 12 in the eastern part of Sioux Falls near 41st and Faith Avenue. Design is nearly complete of this station and construction is set to begin in 2020. Projects funded by a new bond would be specified in a future bond ordinance. The 2020 budget and capital program incorporate the anticipated debt service associated with bonding these projects. The concept of home has a special meaning for all of our residents. Safe, quality, affordable housing that is accessible to all residents is the foundation of our growing community, impacting everything from public safety and health, workforce, economic development, transportation, and just overall quality of life. It is a core tenet of the One Sioux Falls framework because it is unrealistic to make a safe, vibrant, and engaged community without accessible housing. Over the past year, our team has elevated the city's focus on the need for a comprehensive housing plan for our city. One in which we leverage our limited municipal and federal funds to increase the number of clean, safe, and affordable homes accessible to all residents throughout our community. We drove this focus forward by holding the city's first housing summit earlier this year. The industry-focused summit brought together stakeholders from across the housing industry to connect, explore efficiencies, and form partnerships. The valuable insights gained at the summit were used by our team to develop and refine our BHAG, again, a big, hairy, audacious goal, of creating or rehabbing 1,000 dwelling units by 2022. Realizing this goal will rely on an emphasis in leveraging both our existing partners along with forming new partners with proven capabilities in the housing industry. Using the Bloomberg Harvard performance management model to develop a data-driven, cross-departmental strategic plan will help our team to execute upon this BHAG in a data-informed and responsible way. While partnerships remain critical to advancing the dwelling units BHAG, so will the establishment of a housing fund as a long-term sustainable funding source to help meet the housing needs of our growing community. I look forward to working with each of you on the council on identifying both internal and external revenue generators for this fund over the next year. While home availability remains a focus of our team, so does the need for a resource that connects citizens to housing options that meet their unique and individual needs. The Housing Clinic will find the greatest success through using a One Sioux Falls collaborative approach between the City of Sioux Falls, Minnehaha County, Lincoln County, and a nonprofit partner, The clinic, through its 2 navigator positions, will serve our residents by connecting them to existing options within our already resource-rich housing ecosystem. The clinic will provide case management, housing education, and connections to mediation services, and ultimately improve tenant-landlord relations. The workforce tenet of the One Sioux Falls framework largely focuses on what I referred to previously as livability and culture on the hierarchy of needs, as well as our partnerships in the community to train and recruit workers in Sioux Falls. We must continue to build a city where people want to put down roots to live and work. There are 3 workforce-focused budget items I want to highlight today. First, the planning services budget contains $35,000 for our Culture and Arts Task Force that will launch in early 2020. The goal of this group will be to recommend a plan to bring cohesion, unity, and a strategic plan for the city to execute its efforts in the performing and visual arts. Second, the professional services line item for the Event Center campus will increase over last year. Later this month, I expect the final recommendations of the Event Center study group. And while I do not know what these recommendations may or may not be for us to consider as a council, we will likely need to enlist the services of architects, surveyors, and perhaps consultants for design and economic impact studies. This campus is a huge selling point for our city as we seek to recruit and retain employees. Lastly, we are also committed to investing in tomorrow's workforce with a $100,000 commitment to Southeast Technical Institute's new programming. This is the 2nd consecutive year the city has made this investment in preparing a skilled workforce for our community. Engaging people, and specifically engaging the employees of the city, has been a passion of mine since becoming mayor. In the past several months, there has been a concerted effort to re-energize our employees and focus on our workplace culture. We talked earlier about the city's new vision statement, taking care of today for a better tomorrow. We are also injecting the new core values into the employee culture: safety, teamwork, innovation, character, and respect. These were developed by the employees of this city. Uniting our employees behind a shared vision and reinforcing these core values is essential to an engaged and dedicated team. We're recognizing employees who embody these values. A traveling trophy called the Rock is given out monthly to employees who routinely go above and beyond. No, Danny Sanford is not an employee of the city. I just had to clarify that on this slide. The directors and myself also have 12 challenge coins to give out to employees or members of the community, like Mr. Sanford, who are shining examples of embodiment of our core values. With a small quantity of these in circulation each year, these coins are a big deal, and they really require high achievement to get one. Our focus on engagement will continue in 2020 with the citywide implementation of a software platform called Peakon to survey employees and measure their engagement. These survey results will inform workforce changes for employees that often don't cost the taxpayer in dollars, but rather result in policies and practices that make employees feel more valued and trusted. Engaged employees are more productive, they're more dedicated, they work safer, they provide better customer service, and they stay with an organization longer. Earlier this year, we piloted this platform with the health, parks, and HR departments, and the results were an insightful analysis of our employees and what they want from the city as an employer. I'm excited to fund the citywide implementation of Peakon in 2020 and continue to move the needle on employee engagement. Last year, the council appropriated new dollars for the professional leadership development of city employees. From that, we developed the Onward program in partnership with the USD Beacom School of Business. Onward provided 15 city employees with an opportunity to hone their craft as leaders and prepare them for additional responsibilities within the city. A few weeks ago, this cohort presented their class projects to me and the administration leadership team, and let me tell you, we were blown away at the ideas they presented. But even more so, the pure talent of the individuals in this program. I'm asking the council to continue funding for this great program in 2020. Our efforts to improve customer service will only expand in 2020. The Customer Service Initiative began in the Planning Services Department this year, and elements will be infused into other departments. These 4 topics, culture, engagement, professional development, and customer service, are critical to providing excellent customer service to our residents, and it's the responsibility of every single employee to live up to the values of the city and provide excellent customer service. But the city needs a leader to advance these goals and keep them on track. That is why I'm proposing what I feel is one of the most important investments in this entire budget: the addition of a chief culture officer to be housed in the mayor's office to help lead these initiatives. With unemployment at 2.5% in our city and turnover costing the city an internal estimate of $20,000 per employee, there's no more important asset to invest in right now than our people. My administration relies on data for nearly every element of this proposed budget. And as you can see on the screen by our current engagement dashboard, we have opportunities to improve our culture, which will in turn reduce turnover and engage our employees to provide the absolute best service we can to our citizens. As we move forward in the budget discussions in the coming weeks, I look forward to working with the council and the public and listening to feedback. We have much to accomplish as a council to take care of today to create a better tomorrow. And building on that One Sioux Falls framework and with input from our community, this budget proposal moves us in that direction. So I want to thank you for your time and your attention today. Thank you for serving the community as a member of the council. Let's work together and take care of Sioux Falls and move us forward as one city. Thank you and God bless. We're going to take about a 5-minute recess here. And then,
Go ahead. All right, we're back. I want to thanks to the mayor for his budget address. We will now move into our first round of budget hearings. I want to send out well wishes. I think Councilor Kiley is taking notes from home and under the weather, and wish Councilor Sale a happy birthday. And if anybody's looking for any gift ideas, the rumor is he likes pie and beer. So, in those order, exactly. Okay, well, we'll get started. First, we'll start out with Director Pritchett. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Sean Pritchett with Director of Finance, and will be your first presentation during the budget hearings here, providing a broad overview on the Finance Department. So, first I want to, similar to the mayor, I just want to thank everyone who had been engaged and involved in this budget process over the past several months. Staff from Finance and throughout the various departments have dedicated and many hours over the past several months to build toward today and toward the budget that we're presenting before you. In assuming this position as Director of Finance, from my earliest conversations with you as council members, a theme that resonated with me was how we can improve the budget process to more proactively engage the public and the stakeholders in identifying priorities for the city. This year, we incorporated many components to not only build more cross-departmental discussions on budget priorities, but also to engage the public in a meaningful conversation about these budget priorities. And it is not just about the process by which the budget is developed, but also how we communicate that budget. This priority drove the creation of the executive summary, which you would have received as part of your budget. This provides context to the budget, but also tells the story behind the various budget requests in a way that people can connect with. Elements of this theme will be further incorporated into some of the departmental level presentations that will be coming to you in the forthcoming weeks. Today is the beginning of formalizing these budget discussions with the council. Today's presentations will primarily be bigger picture to provide the basis for how the budget was constructed. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, departments and staff will be available to you as needed to address and respond to your questions on a timely basis to ensure that you have the information that you need to review and for the eventual adoption of the 2020 budget for the city. As the Finance Department, we seek to adhere to the core principles that have allowed the City of Sioux Falls to achieve its current financial strength. This strength has not been built in a day. Instead, it is something that is built over many years and centered around conservative, yet forward-thinking and forward-looking approaches to financial management. It is a blessing to be in this solid financial position, but we remain vigilant to ensure that policies and strategies pursued both support and grow this strength, taking care not to allow nearsighted actions and objectives, however attractive they may seem, to distract and detract from these core principles that have gotten us to where we are. Our strength is based not on developing and executing, it is based on developing and executing a thoughtful plan. Our flexibility and our ability to adapt makes us nimble and able to respond to unforeseen events without jeopardizing our financial integrity. And underlying all of this, and most importantly, is the concept of balance. What separates Sioux Falls from our peers is our adherence to this philosophy of maintaining balance. Plan, balance, and adapt. How these principles align to the 2020 budget will be the basis of the rest of my presentation here this afternoon. As Finance Director, this has been my first year going through this budget process with the city. Both staff and the other directors have been more than patient, receptive, and have embraced the changes that we have rolled out as part of this budget process. Launched back in January, springing off the council's initial budget priority sessions and running full steam ahead. Underpinning the entire budget are the revenue forecasts. This entails watching the key economic indicators and analyzing revenue trends. The total budget is built in part on self-supporting enterprise and internal service funds, where demand for services establish the charges for such services. These include water, sewer, parking, and others. And you can see that 27% of all revenues come from these charges for services. The general fund budget is comprised of 80% of tax revenues, primarily sales taxes as well as property taxes. Sales taxes also comprise about 89% of our sales and use tax capital fund. These funding sources play a critical role for the city's capacity to address core operating and capital needs. As I noted, our revenue forecasts are driven in large part by analyzing the economic trends as well as the trends that we're seeing in terms of our revenues. I'll briefly walk through these as you see these on a regular monthly basis, but these help gauge where the Sioux Falls sits from an economic perspective. As we talk about on a monthly basis, unemployment remains extremely low in Sioux Falls, while our overall labor force continues to grow at a steady pace. Key to growing a healthy economy is population, and again, this is an area of strength for Sioux Falls as we continue to grow at about 2% annually. The city's population at the end of 2020 is projected to be 193,800. Low inflation is also key to a healthy economy. When it gets too high, it puts stress on the economic growth and points to an economy that is overheating. At 1.6%, inflation currently remains very stable and in a manageable position. Construction activity also remains strong for Sioux Falls, and as the city continues to set new records year after year in terms of overall permit valuation increases, as of June, we continue to see positive momentum in this area of construction. At a national level, consumer sentiment regarding the economy remains high. Certainly, the challenges faced by local farmers is a concern at the local level. Sioux Falls benefits from an economy that continues to diversify and provide some insulation from the challenges faced by the ag economy. But we are certainly not immune to these effects. We are not as exposed as much as the state is in general due to the diversification of the city's economy and tax base. This is visible when comparing the sales taxes as they continue to trend upwards even into the first 6 months of this year for the city of Sioux Falls. In terms of our trending on revenue, looking back over the past 3 years, when assessing the 12-month rolling average that smooths out our monthly variations in sales tax receipts, you can see that there has been a definite upward trend in this area. Gone are the days of when we used to see 7% increases in sales taxes like we did in the late 1990s. But at the same time, we are seeing slow and steady upward movement in terms of sales tax receipts over the past several years. Last year, the budget projected a 3% sales tax growth for 2019. With 4.8% growth on a 12-month rolling average through June, along with a 5.6% growth year over year in 2019 versus 2018. This budget projects, as the mayor has stated, a reasonable 4% growth rate. If you look specifically at at what was budgeted for sales taxes versus actuals, you can see that we've done a pretty good job of estimating these revenues. Yes, you will see some variation in a particular year. That is why the ADAPT principle that I will be talking about is so key to maintaining our financial integrity. In the past 5 years, between 2014 and 2018, actual sales tax receipts received by the city were within 0.2% of the budgeted expectations. If you look at this over a 10-year average, the difference is about 1.1%. But this also included an aberration for 2009 and the inception of the most significant recession the country has experienced since the Great Depression. Property taxes also play a key role, particularly within our general fund, and they are projected to grow at 5.9% as part of the 2020 budget, with 3.5% of this due to growth and the other 2.4% related to inflation. The inflation component is a key part of the property tax revenues. Postponing or deferring this inflation increase can have a dramatic impact, particularly in future years. The CPI component for the property tax revenue projection is $1.5 million for 2020. But over a 10-year period, if you were to defer this inflationary adjustment, it would result in a net loss year after year after year, with a total impact over 10 years of at least $17 million for a one-time passing of the inflationary adjustment. It is established policy for the city to maintain a reserve equal to 25% of the general fund. Based on the budget as proposed, you can see where the general fund reserve balance is projected to be for the next 5 or more years out. This is shown in the bars in blue. Based on the current modeling and anticipated expenditures, we continue to maintain a 25% reserve policy. However, if the CPI or inflationary adjustment is deferred for just 1 year, as you can see by the green bars, that this would create an unprecedented shift and would dramatically impact reserves over the long term. If you defer the inflationary adjustment every year going forward, well, you can see by the blue line the downward spiral that would occur with our reserve fund and would be fully depleted by the year 2027. Adherence to a long-term vision of financial stability and integrity is critically important. Keeping up with inflation is vital to our ability to adapt and to maintain our balance. We not only looked at how the city has performed historically in terms of our sales tax projections, but we looked at the overall revenue sources for the general fund, which includes our sales taxes, property taxes, and other supplemental revenue sources. The performance is even more consistent. Over the past 5 years, the difference between the budget and actual revenues was off by just 0.1%, which would equate to approximately $100,000 per year, which actually played in our favor. We took in $100,000 more than we had originally budgeted. Over a 10-year average, the difference was just 0.4%, with actual revenues generated, but we generated actual revenues of about $500,000 annually more than what we had anticipated in the budget. We've talked about having a solid plan and how this is key, but maintaining balance is the foundation for maintaining long-term financial stability. Balance means having a functional structure that provides consistency to key annual expense areas and saves responsibly for larger technology investments and for pension commitments. The city's 5 internal service funds and the pension trusts play a key role in these areas. The budget includes a moderate rate adjustment for fleet to ensure that we are properly maintaining and replacing the city's fleet, which includes graders, plows, and other key equipment. Healthcare is expected to have a moderate rate adjustment. No rate adjustments are planned for the workers' compensation or the property liability funds, as both have solid reserves to hedge against current and future losses. The pension trust remains healthy in terms of funding, and like the South Dakota State Retirement System, remains a leader among our peers in terms of its performances. When I talk about balance, at the very core of this concept, and the most obvious perhaps, there needs to be balance between revenues and expenditures. Total expenditures for the budget, as the mayor has stated in his presentation, is $545 million, which includes all funds and capital expenditures for 2020. The largest category is enterprise funds with $151 million in expenditures. Of this amount, $52 million is comprised of capital investments for water reclamation capital improvements. The second largest expenditure is highways and streets for a total of $98 million. And finally, public safety for $72 million, a majority of which is specific to public safety operations as opposed to capital improvements. The general fund includes $178 million of total proposed expenditures. Overall, the budgeted increase for the general fund is 5%. This incorporates a 3% cost of living adjustment that was previously approved for 2019. Since operating expenses are primarily driven by employee salaries and wages for many departments, this drives a large part of that increase in the general fund expenses. Balance means investing in existing as well as new, and this includes both people as well as projects and in maintenance. All of these need to be balanced. In terms of where the increases lie, in the general fund, on the personnel side, $4.4 million of it relates to existing employees. And again, this relates to the 3% cost of living adjustment, steps, insurance, pension, et cetera. 0.8%, or approximately $800,000, is related to new positions. $2.8 million, if you look at the non-personnel side, $2.8 million is due to natural growth and inflation related to existing programs and services. Only about $600,000 is new non-personal operating initiatives. The other thing I want to point out is about $1 million of the increase overall of the non-personal increase is related to repairs and maintenance, which goes back to the theme of taking care of today. Over the next several weeks, and also included in the summary, you will hear from the departments outlining these changes within their individual budgets. The second essential balance objective is between capital and operating, with the first penny and property taxes committing to the general fund and core operating expenses. These dedicated sources ensure we continue to invest in operations at an appropriate level. The second penny, sales tax, is dedicated to capital improvements. And again, a dedicated funding source creates balance and ensures that we continue to maintain an ongoing commitment to long-term capital investments to keep pace within the city growth and to keep moving forward. As the mayor noted, the capital program or capital budget has shifted funds toward infrastructure in the next several years, particularly in 2020 and 2021. This reflects an overwhelming desire among our city's residents to boost investments in basic infrastructure. In the fourth and fifth years of the capital program, balance begins to shift back with additional investments programmed for parks and recreation, which overall sees a modest increase when the entirety of the capital program is considered. But certainly, highways and streets receives the largest portion and the largest increase as part of the 5-year capital program. And while the capital program is definitely infrastructure intensive, as you can see on the right pie graph there, the operating budget, as shown on the left slide, shows balance between the public works, public safety, health, housing, and our investments in culture and recreation. A general fund for core operations and a sales and use tax fund for capital expenditures creates balance and ensures that we do not increase capital investments at the expense of funding core operations, and vice versa. While having separate funds can seem complicated, their separate structure with dedicated and distinct funding sources guarantees balance. If you layer in the entertainment tax fund, you have essentially another dedicated funding source. Funded by the third penny, this distinct fund ensures the city's continued commitment to funding entertainment venues and promotional activities that are essential to a well-rounded community. Restrictions established by state statute and by this city council through city ordinance ensures the entertainment tax is used exclusively in the areas of entertainment and promotion, and not for core government services or capital infrastructure. even when they may seem like an expedient policy at a given point in time. We will talk more about the entertainment tax fund in a separate presentation toward the end of this budget hearing. The last piece of the balancing act is ensuring a balance between paying for capital investments with cash and using debt to finance these investments. And as we shared with you at our last monthly report, where we focused on debt, this administration is committed to maintaining a balanced and disciplined approach to debt, working to continue to minimize debt service to less than 30% of the available funds within the sales and use tax fund. This ensures that we continue to have the cash to invest in regular infrastructure improvements while also using debt in a principled way to fund those long life investments that will benefit not just current users, but future users as well. And as the mayor pointed out, and noted in his presentation, we have a history of having lower debt per capita of any city among our peers in the region. And even as we layer in the investment for the water reclamation improvements underway, we continue to retain that low overall debt structure. The administration will be looking to bring a new bond issuance request to the council for consideration in late 2019 and early 2020 to fund the construction of the public safety training facility as well as fire station number 12. As we continue to analyze the potential bond issuance, the opportunity to refund the Quality of Life 2 bonds, generating interest savings and freeing up debt service reserve dollars provides an additional opportunity to incorporate phase 3 of the River Greenway into the issuance of this bond. If you've been downtown this summer, you can feel the energy and excitement everywhere you go. And we are really seeing the fruition of commitments to downtown development that have occurred over the past 20 years. Timing of this, as the mayor noted, is critical in regard to the River Greenway investment to ensure that construction can be completed in conjunction with the development of the adjacent site. And again, going back to that philosophy of being able to adapt, this provides us that opportunity because of the strength of our financial position to adapt when these opportunities arise. Finance has set a big, hairy, audacious goal to achieve AA1 sales tax bond and AAA underlying bond rating for the city of Sioux Falls. Our bond rating will be reassessed in conjunction with the issuance of any new bond. This is a lofty goal, but one we believe the city can achieve by properly communicating the strength of the city's economy, the strength of the city's financial position, and the city's commitment to responsible service delivery. Outstanding and forecasted debt is reasonable by any measure. Debt is only used to fund capital investments that will serve the city for many years. The city doesn't have any general obligation debt. We repay debt on a short repayment schedule. Our debt coverage ratios are rock solid. And as previously noted, we have low debt per capita. As this chart shows, we continue to maintain that low per capita debt even with the inclusion of a new bond issuance funding these important projects. And as we showed at our monthly presentation, we still remain lower than any of our peer cities in the region. The last core principle to sound financial management is adaptation. We plan for what we know, but our ability to adapt for what we do not know is key to being able to address unforeseen events of potential significant financial impact, such as weather events, economic disruptions, or time-sensitive opportunities to make public investments that leverage private dollars or create positive impact for our community. Having a solid plan and maintaining financial balance are key to being able to adapt when necessary. And our ability to adapt is not a new concept. Most recently, we had the opportunity to adapt to invest for the State Theater, leveraging a significant private investment, and finally opening an important venue for downtown that will attract visitors for years to come. But we were also able to adapt to the recent flooding events last spring, acquiring flood-prone properties to expand our park's green space and make needed repairs to flood-damaged property while awaiting federal reimbursement. We have been able to adapt when sales tax growth shrunk after peaking in the late 1990s. And in 2008, we experienced negative sales tax growth, but we adapted and we continued to grow our community. Under the mayor's leadership and direction, finance continues to work with each of the departments to develop contingency plans to address revenue reductions should they occur due to economic disruptions. While many of the reductions could be painful, we prepare so we can adapt in the most prudent and responsible way. Every year, we budget a small portion of our reserve to support budgeted expenditures. We do this knowing in part that we turn back 1% to 2% of the budget that will not be spent due to timing and other factors. In 2020, we budgeted the use of $3.3 million to support general fund expenditures from the reserve. This is down from the $3.7 million that had been budgeted from reserve in 2019. On average, we have budgeted $3.7 million from reserve every year over the past 10 years. However, we actually ended up adding to reserves on average about $800,000 annually over the past 10 years. In some years, like 2015 and 2016, we did require utilization of the reserves. In others, we have added back to reserves. As our general fund grows, so too must our reserves grow to be able to maintain that 25% policy threshold at year end. The reserve is key and one of the most important tools that we have to be able to adapt. This chart shows the projected general fund balance over the next several years. The amount of the reserve to budget in a particular year is, we work backwards to assemble this information, and it is taken directly from the long-term outlook, ensuring that based on the longer-term revenue and expense projections, we can continue to meet the 25% reserve threshold and preserve the city's financial integrity. The last thing I would leave you with, I thought I would include this slide showing where the city's tax dollars go. If you look and combine property taxes, frontage assessments, first, second, and third penny sales taxes, you can see how each of these tax dollars is allocated. 33 cents goes to highways and streets, 25 cents goes to public safety, 16 cents goes to culture and recreation, which includes libraries, parks, and entertainment venues, and 6 cents goes to support sales tax supported debt services. During the month of August, various departments will be presenting their budgets in more detail. It is anticipated that the public hearing would occur for the budget on September 10th with final adoption on September 17th. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide this summary for the 2020 budget from the Finance Department. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have today or as they are ongoing via email, or I'll be at each of the presentations over the next month as well.
Thank you, Director. Councilors, any questions? Councilor Staley.
Thank you, Sean. Yes, I've got a few questions. First of all, a comment.
Yes.
And you made the same, gave us the same chart a few weeks ago when you gave us your monthly finance report. But you know, I know you're heralding our low debt per capita, but in the big scheme of things, we have to look at what financial burden our residents are facing. The reality is that, as you showed in that slide, in 2024, half of the debt is going to be comprised of the waste treatment debt, the $260 million. And so what I'm hearing from people is that they're becoming more heavily burdened under property tax payments, and then we're going to have this water sewer payment. And so we can say we don't have a whole lot of debt citywide, but what we really need to pay attention to is what is happening to our residents financially. So for the record, I just want, and I know you were putting a little defense out here just now about why we need to pass this property tax increase. I get it. And I would, just for the record, I will not be voting for that, because we have seen the school district raising property taxes, our county is opting out for that, and at some point, you know, these residents are saying, wow, we've had enough. We hear this when we have the Board of Equalization. I mean, the heavy burden is coming down on people. This is one way as a city we can say, you know, we've got the sales tax input coming in. We can pass this by even for a year, because you were making it sound like if we continue to do that, we're going to create a precedence of disaster. And I get it. That's your job to say that. But just so you know that I'm not going to be supporting that. I didn't support it last year as well. So I want to come back to two things. And interestingly enough, we're talking about bonding. And a petition drive just started today that will be addressing how we vote on bonding issues, the threshold that it takes for a council to pass it. And Councilor Erickson actually went before the Charter Revision Commission and asked that we change that threshold to 6 councilors instead of the 5, you know, a supermajority. So what I want to ask is the specific numbers we heard about two bonding projects. The first being River Greenway, second being that safety building. So what numbers are we tying to that?
We're waiting for the final designs to come in so we can have final numbers. When I tell you a final number, we're held to a final number, and we set inappropriate expectations for people. But we have ranges that we're looking at, and we've discussed those. Public safety facility being in the $20 to $30 million range. That's where the variation is. The fire station had been previously allocated approximately $3 million, so that's what we've built into our conceptual design. The quality of life will depend upon when we refund or refinance those pieces, so that refunding or refinancing those quality of life bonds is a key piece of those, and I think they have approximately $10 million outstanding balance right now, but it wouldn't be new debt, it would be refinancing it with lower interest rates.
Is that the River Greenway?
No, that is the older quality of life bonds that we already have on the books. So we are at a time period when we can refinance that. And then as far as the River Greenway, we're continuing to look at that piece. We're looking at where the cost estimates come in. So that could be anywhere from, say, 5 to 10 million. So, but each of these pieces, we're looking at an overarching, how much do we fit in within that bond piece, and we adapt from there. So
how that looks is that in 2020, we're thinking after the first of the year, then you come and ask us to.
Once we have, yes, more defined cost estimates for each of these, which does require some preliminary design to be completed so that we can give you the most accurate pieces of that information.
And then how, we got the safety, or not safety, the swimming pool park master plan. I think we spent $250,000 to do this master plan. We're looking at what we think of the pools and the ball fields and everything. And I haven't quite heard, I don't know if Don Kearney's still here, but you haven't quite heard the end result of that. And I'm holding my breath on these on their swimming pool situations. And so how do you incorporate that study into our budget?
That would have
into the capital plan.
Once that is completed and the priorities are kind of established, working, then that would be taken in consideration for future capital programs and adjustments that get made in the future capital program.
So it's not that would not impact. That's not going to be happening this next year.
I don't know what the timing of the completion of that is, but it wasn't completed in time to factor the results of that into this budget request for 2020.
So that if it does happen, let's say in February, then how does that look for the budget book? I mean, do we have, it
Our
comes
capital
back?
program remains the same as adopted. It would have to be amended for anything to be adjusted.
So that we're not going to see any big changes from that in the next year, probably.
I don't know what the timing is. I'd have you speak when Mr. Director Carney speaks here in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
He'd be better to answer that question for you.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. When we talk the bonding, on page 14 of my presentation here, of my packet, it says balance new bond issue, and then it has 4 areas: public safety, Fire Station 12, River Greenway, and refinancing of the quality of life 2 bonds. When we talk about that, is that all going to be one package that's brought to us, or is it going to be 2 separate bonding?
It's going to depend somewhat on timing. It could be done with it like a Series A and a Series B type of situation for portions of it. We try to minimize the overall administrative cost of it. So if we're able to do it under a single bond council, reduce some of the bond issuance fees by consolidating it, that would be optimal. But there are different ways that can be structured, and we would look to, when we bring it forward in the future, we'd bring more clarity to that.
Okay, and that makes sense. I just want to make sure that each item is very defined and specific for that. That if it's the desire of the administration to lump it all in together, I want to know how much it's saving us in the end, because if we're talking $10,000 we saved, let's have 2 separate bonds for 2, because we're really lumping in 4 really different items together. 2 are related and the other 2 are kind of related, but for me personally, not speaking for this council, I think it's important that each item is a standalone, but I understand saving the money. I think that's important too, as we move for that. Thank you for your presentation. I think this is a lot of really good information for us. I know on this screen, not to put you on the spot, but the timeline of everything, I hope that we can have you come back again and squeeze you in to talk about finances budget and not just finance as a whole. So hearing specifically from your department, the vision for your department, what it looks like, how it's changed. You've been there a year now, so I'd love to hear more of what actual finance is doing for the budget for it. But this is wonderful information, and I'm very appreciative, so thank you.
Oh, and we can share some of that information at a future one. I would say we have a very boring budget by most standards. It's mostly salaries. We have extremely low training budget. There isn't much besides salaries in there, and a few consultants for like our audits and things like that. But
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I would appreciate just maybe sneaking it in one of the other ones.
sure.
You go first, though, if it's short. You don't want to go behind Mark Cotter. Sorry. Sorry.
You just looked up. What?
Got your attention. Thank you.
Counselor Sale.
Yes, I got two quick questions on the bond. The mayor and you referred to achieving a A1 sales tax bond and a AAA underlying bond. Could you tell the council where we currently are?
So we're just one step below those. So we would be AA2 for a pledged revenue bond and AA1 on an underlying basis if we were to issue a general obligation bond. So we want to move one step up.
Excuse me. Do you have the steps that is needed to be obtained by the city to get to a higher bond rating?
We're working through that, and part of that, a big piece of that is communicating our story to the investors. So we hope that we can bring the bond rating agencies to Sioux Falls either this fall or shortly before we would need to have the rating done as part of a bond issuance, so we can tell our story, because we have a great story to tell. But if as you talk to people that come to our community and are always surprised by what we have here, they don't always get to see it until they really come here and feel it. So we have a great story to tell, and part of that is about telling our story through the budget and making it one where you can touch and feel what we're doing. So
My last question on bonding, what is our capability today? How much bonding authority do we currently have before we hit the you can't go any higher borrowing limit?
I don't even want to touch that one. It's a lot. We have a very low debt structure relative to everybody else. It would be, Tom's going to be mad at me for saying, it would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Anybody else have any questions? Counselor Starr.
Yes, thank you, Director. I guess I'm on page 7 because I want to talk about increasing property taxes and building this part of it, because what I normally do is not necessarily look at it from the city's perspective to start. I look at it from our residents' point of view. And a small cost of living property tax increase today turns into a very large property tax increase for our property owners and our citizens of Sioux Falls. The mayor talked earlier about housing and the importance of finding accessible housing for our community. And I think this is the year where we can make a difference as citizens. When I take the overall $500 million budget that was presented to us today, you multiply that over 5 years, we're at $2.5 billion with a $17 million property tax increase. I think the cuts are there to make that. I think the ability to not pass that on and that large $17 million tax increase over the next 5 years to our residents is something that we should achieve and something we should really strive for. I don't think it would stretch us that far to make those cuts and to make those adjustments where we could take a year off in a year when we're seeing some large things come on line for other units of government, whether it's the county and the $50 million new jail, the $200 million worth of new schools that we're investing in, the investments we're making as a city into the new school and being able to make that accessible to parents and students. I think we have the ability, and I think we can stretch when we get to the end of this budget to make that $1 million cut is all it's going to take this year, and to continue to do that. Like I said, when I flip that chart over, it scares me what it's doing to our making homes accessible in our community. It's going to hurt the people that can least afford it. it doesn't sound like protecting much as a city and as an organization, and we're worried about our growth and what we do and how we do that. But on the other side of that, what it does to our community members is concerning to me, and I hope it's a challenge that we take a look at and can find that $1 million worth of cuts this year out of a $500 million budget that we wouldn't have to increase property taxes. We're getting a nice bump in property taxes because of inflation already. I think you said
For growth, it was
for growth, was it 2.3.5%
3.5% for growth and 2.4% for inflation.
for inflation? So we're already getting an inflation adjustment as part of the property taxes already, just because properties are going up and the taxable base is there. So more of a statement and a concern, and that's definitely something that I think when we look at lists of amendments when we get to the end will be one that I plan on making. So let's find a way to make that work maybe through this process as we listen to the departments. So.
As we come closer to, we'll discuss, kind of going back to Councilor Staley's comments too, on what is the direct impact to the homeowner, like what is the feeling, because you hear something like the county opting out and it creates a sense or a vision of what that financially impacts to you, but we've discussed this with the county and it equates to essentially $1 per month for a $100,000 home. So while it is, yes, opting out, it isn't a drastic or a significant financial impact for most people in terms of $1 per month is a cup of coffee. So we want to make sure that those are real dollars so you understand that piece too as we get closer.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Director O'Toole on Personnel Services budget. Welcome.
Good evening, Council. Bill O'Toole from Human Resources. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about one of our biggest assets at the City of Sioux Falls, our city employees. But it's also important to understand the costs that are behind those personnel issues as well. Just real quickly, what we're going to be covering today is we'll look at the functional allocation of personnel across the various spectrums of city government. We'll also talk about the employees per 10,000 population that you heard the mayor visit about as well. I want to share with you some of the employment statistics that we're experiencing and look at the broad budget, the all-in budget, and our personnel costs in relation to that, and then kind of drill that down into the general fund and take a look at where some of those costs, where we're incurring those costs. We'll talk about some part-time equivalents and the recommended 20 new positions for next year. And on this slide, this is the 2019 allocation of our current 1,260 employees across the various spectrums. As you look at this, obviously you can see that the biggest sector is public safety, and the total number there is 525 employees. There's 208 in police, there's 11 in parking, and 208, 306 in fire for the 325 total. And I'll just kind of work my way around the pie chart here. The enterprise funds, which is water, rec, landfill, and lights, it's got 169 employees. Culture and recreation, which is library and parks and recreation, is 140. General government, which consists of the mayor, attorneys, council, finance, facilities management, IT, communications, fleet, GIS, and HR is 181 employees. Highways and streets is engineering, streets, and public works administration at 107. The health department is 82, and urban development, which is our planning and building services, including our housing, at 56. And this is, for all intents and purposes, the same chart. It looks a little bit different, but the numbers are the same. As you'll see across the bottom, you'll see the total number of city employees in 1990, and then fast forward to the far right side at 2020 for the 1,280 with the 20 new positions. And you can see back in 1990, we had about 83 city employees per 10,000 population, and to the present day, it's 66. It's interesting to look, if you look over those 30 years, we've increased our population 92% since 1990, or over 92,900 employees, or people, And we've increased city employees 53%, or 442. And if you did just an average of each year, and that's not how the employees fell, but on average, it's about 14, almost 15 positions added every year. And we always like to take a look then, how does this stack up against some of our peers? As you can see from this chart, on a per 10,000 population basis, against some of our peers, the city of Sioux Falls is faring very well. Our position really hasn't changed too much. You've seen me share this chart in years past, and we think this is a good story to share with respect to the number of city employees. Some employment statistics, again, some really good information here from 2014 over to 2018 in terms of the number of applications that we're receiving. So we like the upward trend of the recent past since 2016. Just as an example there, in 2018, we had 91 vacancies, and based on the 3,048 applications, it's about 35 applications for each vacancy. So we like what we're seeing there. And of course, it's a good trend, but when you overlay the unemployment rate as well, that was shared earlier across that spectrum. 2014, it was about 3.7%, all the way to the present day of about 2.4%. We think these numbers look pretty good. The other thing that I would like to add at this point too, and we've appreciated the council's support when we've come forward with compensation and benefit studies. Obviously, when we do that, that's very important that we continue to ensure that we're paying market competitive wages for our employees. So when we go out to recruit our employees, that we can do a good job with that. Kind of looking on the other side, if you will, this is kind of the back door, and looking at our turnover rate from 2009 to 2018. You can see in 2014 there's a bit of a blip. Some of you will remember we had some pension changes that occurred. We had some people that kind of held back, so we had a spike. But the numbers are still very strong here in ending last year. Overall turnover rate of 7.2, and if you factor out retirements, it was 5%. I tried to obtain some benchmark data, but I'll share with you just a little bit that I was able to get. The city of Rapid City, for example, last year had a 10.7% turnover rate, and the county was experiencing a 13% turnover rate. So again, looking at the entire city budget, $545.4 million, the 26% personnel costs is about $144.1 million for personnel. That's up $7.4 million in increases in wages and benefits for city employees for 2020. And I'm going to continue to drill this down into the general fund, and we'll talk a little bit about what's behind some of those costs. In the general fund, the total general fund is $177.7 million, and the personnel costs are 67%, as we were talking about earlier. The $5.4 million increase in the general fund, what's behind that is a little over $4 million in wage increases, and if you'll remember, we had a 3% COLA that was applied. It accounts for steps, and it also accounts for the 20 new positions that are in this budget. There was a $1.28 million increase on the benefit side. We had a 5% increase in health insurance and a 4% increase in dental. And that's kind of what's behind the increases. And again, we'll take a closer look here in just a second. Again, on this chart, you can see of the total personnel services, wages and salaries represents the largest portion of that at 71%, or $85.2 million. On the benefit side, the health, dental, life insurance is $15.1 million, pension is $14 million, OASI and workers' compensation $5.2 million, for a total of $119.5 million. And I did go back and look at prior years. I didn't have a chart to share with you on this. There's been very little movement in terms of these percentages and the allocations going back at least to 2017. And again, you heard me say that 67% of the personnel costs in the general fund Here's just kind of a longer look to say how has that fluctuated over time. It really hasn't changed on a percentage basis. Really going back to 2011, pretty consistent. Another important piece is, of course, our part-time, particularly when you talk about our Parks and Recreation Department. We've got 247 part-time equivalents throughout the city of Sioux Falls, and this is just giving you the breakdown. Again, no surprise that Parks and Recs is the highest area, but I did want to highlight in terms of some of the costs, when you look at the entire cost for wages in the city of Sioux Falls, $87.7 million, and for the part-time wages, it's about $7.4 million for part-time wages. I did share with the council and with the public, there's a handout. I won't go through each of these in a lot of detail. I have provided a brief summary of each of these respective positions that are included as new FTEs for 2020. The total cost for the 20 positions it's $1.48 million. And they're broken out, obviously, there's 12 positions in the general fund, and there's 8 positions in the enterprise fund. The general fund is about $769,000 for the positions, and the enterprise funds are $709,500. Just to share some of the costs behind these new positions. But again, the handout, which is available, it gives a brief summary of what each of these respective positions will be doing throughout the city of Sioux Falls. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thanks, Director. Questions, Councilor Sale?
Thank you. Very good presentation. I have 2 questions on opposite ends. Last year, we talked about increasing the wages for part-time park workers to be more competitive in that environment. Do you have any plans to do that in 2020 to again make the part-time park people more competitive with the workforce?
We have followed some strategies to raise that. There's not a new proposal to lift that up again inside of this proposal. But that is something we're monitoring much closer than prior years. But there's not a new proposal to lift all the part-time wages.
Was that an issue this in 2019 with part-time summer workers? Since we raised the wage last year for part-time people to make it easier in 2019, how did that turn out?
I think it turned out really well. Obviously, any movement you can make in that regard is going to make it a little bit easier to attract those folks. And we think we're at a good spot right now. And again, we'll continue to reassess it if we have problems finding the people to fill the positions. We will take a look at it again.
Okay. My second question is this new position, the camp counselor, chief cultural officer. What kind of job qualifications, wages would we be setting somebody that can teach us all songs and do those type of things?
And I'll just kind of stick to the cost question that's tied to that. The chief culture officer, again, that would reside in the mayor's office, the total wages and benefits for that position would be $124,361. And again, as you heard the mayor talk about the importance of culture, employee engagement, culture and climate in any organization is a significant issue. And I think it's a very strategic move on his part to provide dedicated resources and a very focused attention on those kinds of issues. And the dollars tied to it, I think are reasonable for what it's going to be asked to do. We don't have a fully developed job description just yet, but it is forthcoming.
Thank you.
Councilor Neitzer.
Just bouncing off of that, what do you do in regards in HR in relation to culture and that sort of thing, and already?
The one thing that's unique about what's happening here is you're dedicating one person that's going to take ownership and responsibility and tie it directly to the mayor's office, so it brings that elevated sense of importance to the organization. Yes, we do have some responsibility in that regard, but it's also shared in terms of other duties and responsibilities. And this will be a position that works obviously very closely with our office. I mean, we all have take ownership for employee engagement and culture issues. So there'll be very much a collaborative process with the position.
That was going to be my other question was, you'd have to be careful not to run into where you have two messages coming from two different places. What was there, I mean, thought about having somebody in your organization do it?
The mayor and yes, we had some extensive conversations about that. And frankly, when we started talking about it, we both sat down and said, we want to be very clear about the roles and responsibilities so that we do understand where it's shared and where it's clearly defined to be different. And we actually spent some time laying out roles and responsibilities of each so that it was very clear moving forward that you wouldn't have redundancy and you wouldn't have ambiguity in terms of what the expectations are of the position moving forward.
And this may be more of a fair question for the mayor directly, but do you think there's a problem with culture right now, or that what's the sell on?
I wouldn't suggest there's a problem with culture. What I would suggest is that it is time that you take a look at and you dedicate time, resources, and effort toward it. And when you think about what he's trying to accomplish in this administration with the new vision and mission, employee engagement and Pecan, it's actually very well connected in terms of the budget proposal and the direction that we're heading.
Thank you.
Councilor Erickson?
Thank you. Sorry, just writing a note. I have a couple questions, just piggybacking off of that position. Just wondering, just speaking aloud, wondering if that's something that can be already done within the administration and if there's a person within the administration that can already do that versus adding another person on there or having it be the message coming out of the mayor's office. I don't know. My question is, when will that job description be done and available? I can't vote for something that I don't know. And so if it's not going to be ready before the budget's ready, it's really hard to support a new employee that I don't really know what they're going to do.
Well, I think we can have one ready, and it's not going to take long to finalize it, but going through the budget process, I think we have adopted previous positions that didn't have draft job descriptions to them before, but we can certainly get you the framework that might give you a little more concrete information.
And I understand that this is just a really different position and it's new. And so having a really clear vision of what that is, and the mayor can address us and maybe sell it to us a little differently, but it's not a new concept, and I understand the culture officer position in corporate America as well, but within government, wondering if it can be just reorganized within the administration currently to have that message come out of the mayor's office, or I don't know. Not that I want to micromanage how he does his job, but we appropriate the money, so that's our opportunity to micromanage that job anyways. My other question is just looking at the budget book, a couple of things that just caught my eye. Anytime we see significant increases, just curious if there was a big change. Supplies and materials went up supplies and materials went up 78%, and then training and education went up 140%. So I'm wondering if you could just talk to those two items. I'm on page 12 of the budget book for anybody following along. We're talking peanuts compared to, going from $5,600 to $13,500, but anytime we see those significant increases to 78% or 140%, I think that's a big deal.
Are you in the, what'd you say, what page are you on?
I'm on page 12 of the human resources budget. And I don't want to split hairs over, a couple $1,000 here and there, but when you see those large increases, I'm always curious as far as, oh yeah, we need new tables and chairs and we're getting rid of all the old stuff or whatever it is. I'm just curious.
The supplies and materials increase, what I can tell you, I do know that the addition there, or the increase there is for the Pecan employee engagement survey of that's about 64,000.
Okay. So is that a one-time? Or will that be ongoing?
That will be an ongoing.
Okay, so if a new chief officer, culture officer is approved, would that then go out of your budget and into the mayor's budget? Because wouldn't that be the employee engagement would be that culture officer?
It may, yes,
Okay.
it may.
I just wasn't sure how that would would go. I do have other questions on some of these other job additions, but I will save that for each director as they come forward, because I think that question's probably better suited for them. But for the mayor's office, obviously him not being here, just wanted to bring that up too.
If I could just one last time kind of go back into the issue of the chief culture officer. I mean, for me, when you simplify it, culture, climate, values, those kinds of things, that's what that's geared toward. And if you look at the literature, there is a lot of supporting information out there that talks about how that is a different role, and having that tied to the CEO of any organization is a good move. But I understand what you're saying, Councilor.
Yep, thank you.
Councilor Staley.
Bill, thank you for the presentation. Anytime you grow government, in my opinion, we have to be able to take this back to the citizens and tell them what's happening here. Why are we spending $1.48 million extra? What are we getting for that? Now, let me just say that I'm totally supportive of adding more police officers. Right now in our community, that is what people want to see happen. They want more police protection on the streets. They're going to get behind that. The culture position, that's going to be a hard sell. And I understand we're trying to help our employees, and let me say I respect our employees, but I think there's a general sense in the community that the employees have a fantastic retirement system. We're giving them the cost of living increases. I've been behind their contracts. The police department always supported negotiating so that they are appreciated, compensated, listened to. That's what I want. But growing these positions, I'm not sure that we can really go back to the public and say, this is really what we need for $1.48 million. What are we giving them? I want to ask you about penitentiary workforce, because you're having here a park and recreation part-time, or a park service worker. Where are we at with utilizing the penitentiary workforce to help with this?
We have actually had good relationships and discussions with the warden and the departments and the use of inmate labor, and we are using them in the organization and in Parks and Recreation. We've also consulted with their head of Pheasantland Industries for other potential opportunities to partner with them for savings on different operational kinds of issues.
And I think we should have an update on that, because I was a big advocate for that before the mayoral election. I met with Tenhagen several times after the fact, that this is a way we can save money, so we don't have to add another position to this. It'd be nice to have an update as to how we're utilizing them, and that we can tell the public we're saving you money because we're utilizing this workforce in addition to helping them. I haven't heard that yet. So all I'm seeing is we're adding these 20 positions.
We are adding, I understand what you're saying, Councilor. I mean, I would also go back to the slide on the employees per 10,000 population. We are very responsible, and I would argue that this tells the story that we have not inappropriately added staff over time too aggressively. When you look at where we are at 66 full-time employees per 10,000 population.
Well, no, and I understand, I get the park part of it, but when we're talking about the culture officer, I'm not sure that that's going to be an easy sell to the public. And the question, Bill, also is that from Mayor Huther, the transition to Tenhagen is that Huther had Heather Hitterdahl, one person. Tenhagen has hired 2 chief of staffs, correct?
He has a chief of staff and a deputy chief of staff.
So he's kind of got an extra position already in his office that Huther didn't have. I mean, if we want to compare apples to this administration to this one, and people, they want to know, who we have, what amount of money is going into staff, and then we're going to add another position into that. But let me tell you, if we're going to add a position, the position I'm hearing from the public, and I just had a conversation with a high-profile citizen about this. As a council member, I'm spending a lot of my time, and willingly, happily so, listening to concerns from citizens. They're calling me, I'm using our staff, I'm going out, I'm spending a lot of time helping people. And the citizen, high-profile developer says to me, Teresa, isn't that something we should have an ombudsman designated for that from the city? That we should be having someone in our city who's fielding these calls from citizens who don't feel that they're being treated with respect and responsiveness. I don't see, there's nothing here that is addressing that for the people. We're talking about helping a culture for, this position is going to help our employees. It's another effort to reach out and affirm the employees. I think that's right. You said this is about the employees, listening to them. So I'm saying, where's the emphasis to reach out to say to the citizens, what do you need? One other thing I wanted to see happen, I've wanted to say, let's take Project Trim and let's have energy with staff to take that on so that we can be caring for the trees in the boulevard. I'm told over and over again, we don't have the money for that, Teresa. We can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. And yet, we're going to hire 20 new people to do all sorts of other things. So it's about the priorities and what we go back and say to the citizens, it's your money, this is what we're bringing forth for you. So I'm seeing kind of a disconnect here.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know that I would necessarily agree with all of it, and we certainly don't need to agree with all of it.
No, we don't need to.
But I would argue that the 20 positions, like all city employees, are there. I mean, we provide the programs and services to the citizens of Sioux Falls. That's what our employees do. And I think they do a really good job with that. And there are many employees within each department that have the opportunity to take and field, I guess if there are customer kinds of issues, and I don't know that we need to have one singular person to do that. We've got multiple people that are resolving and responding to all kinds of service issues. And
but let me say, I think it would be to your benefit to have bullet points under each of these positions that we can go back to Susie Jones down the street and say, hey, this is what you're going to get for this position. This is how it's going to help you as a citizen.
But I think you'll have an opportunity to also ask each of the directors who have a position in the budget those kinds of questions as well. And I'm sure they're going to be more than happy to visit about what more specifics tied to the position. What I try to do with some of those is at least give you a summary of the position if it was an existing job title. Otherwise, if it was something new, I tried to at least give you a summary of what the position would be doing so that you did had some background for each of those respective positions. Anybody else?
Yep. Councilor Starr.
Director O'Toole, you get the brunt of this, don't you, today? The thing is, he's not here for us to ask these questions, so that's the difficult part about it. And I was going to skip this because in a $500 million budget, this is probably too easy of a topic to go after an $80,000 position. And we've spent a lot of time talking about it, but I can't resist. With the new cultural officer, would that position be under advice and consent of the council?
No, it would not.
We could make it that way, though, couldn't we? Could we add it to that list of appointments?
It's not considered a city director. Just like you don't have advice and consent over the mayor's executive secretary, those just don't fall within that purview.
No problem. That was my easy one by the time we're done. The other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I do this every year, tell me about how we encourage departments to use interns and recruit staff as a recruiting tool. Is there an incentive for departments to use interns, diverse interns, to continue to add on to that? I guess I'm looking for the BHAG that it's important to continue that. We talk about education and educating students and the things that we're doing in our community, and it feels like from a distance there's a lot of departments that do really well with interns, and then there's other departments that, and I don't know if that's just director related or if that's, where the initiative is for that.
Your timing is really good. You heard the mayor talk about the Onward program. One of the things that came out of the Onward program is they have cohorts and projects that they work on. And one of the 3 primary projects that came out of that was an internship program. and trying to come forward with a process and procedure and a very established, defined program, and they just did an absolute outstanding job. And I'll give you just kind of a sneak peek. It's called the Ascend internship program, and it really was an incredible effort on behalf of the employees that worked on it. We are going to implement it going forward. We recognize the benefit of getting interns, and in fact, this year, HR even hired an intern this year, and we were excited to offer that opportunity. And we've also been partnering with the Sioux Falls Development Foundation and other workforce people to say, okay, we'll take your high school interns and we'll find placement. So we've very intentionally tried to bring all that together to recognize the importance of utilizing internships, and you're going to hear more and see more of that going forward.
I think one of the things that we could do is when the interns do come, we did get a chance to meet your intern, and a very bright young lady, and I think she's doing some really good work and helping out in some areas that maybe needed some attention that didn't have the ability to do that in stretching, as well as them having the opportunity to learn. But we do always encourage them to come to the podium at the council meetings to give them that part of the their internship experience, and they're all excited about it usually by the time, especially the planning ones.
And I'm just going to use the opportunity to do a plug for Ashley Needham, our intern. She's just done a fantastic job, and that is one of the things she is helping with is we're developing videos. You might have seen some of them on our social media sites now. She's helping in that regard to help identify the various positions we have in the city of Sioux Falls, what it's like to work for the city of Sioux Falls, why somebody might want to come here, and it's been a great opportunity for everybody involved.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I just have one more. So that leads me to, what are we doing to diversify our workforce? You know, it seems what I hear when I talk to directors and staff is we can't hire any more diversity because they don't apply. Or we can only hire the people that apply. And that's sad, because I think that we have the ability to go out and do a better job recruiting more applicants for our departments to diversify our workforce. We're seeing that diversity in our community. We're seeing second and third generation refugees and immigrants that may need something on top of what we're doing. And internships, I feel, are one of those places where we can do that. But where does your department lead the rest of the city to help diversify the workforce of the city?
Well, and I think we've talked about this in years past as well. I mean, one of the first things you do is you analyze your workforce and find out where you have underutilization in the various occupations. You know, we do an affirmative action plan each year, so our hiring manager knows if we're underutilized in any particular sector. We do have a very broad, diverse base of people. We reach out whenever we do have a vacancy to try to connect with them. Is there more that can be done? Maybe there is more that can be done, and we'd be certainly all ears to doing just that, because we would love nothing more than to have our workforce be an exact mirror to our population. I mean, a lot of people would like to have that. And again, welcome any ideas you might have and be willing to share as well. But again, we identify it. We're reaching out where we can. We are engaged. Our employment team of Jane Hannestad and Kim Stolken, and in conjunction with some of the departments, particularly police and fire, they've developed some really good programming and efforts at making connections there as well. But we would love to have better numbers than what we're experiencing right now.
Absolutely, and I guess that's why I wanted to put those two questions together, is that where we are underrepresented in positions, maybe it is the internship programs that get people into those type of positions and give them the encouragement to see what the job is, as well as to let those hiring managers get a chance to meet those candidates while they're still in high school or college, and them to also consider those type of things. So again, I'm a big believer that internships, they provide a value, they need to be paid, because we expect kids to go back and pay for their education and do that. It's not a program where we're not paying. So always want to encourage the departments to include internship money as part of their programming and looking forward, and that using that as also a recruitment tool. Because I believe we do have a number of city employees who did start in internships and summer programs and things while they were still in school, and it's a best way to recruit those type of positions. So,
And just for the record, in case anybody's wondering, we do pay our interns.
didn't say we didn't. I just,
No, that's a plug.
want
I
to make
say,
sure
yeah,
that
we
it's
are. We're an attractive place to be for interns.
Thank you.
Counselor Neitzer.
This almost slipped by me because I had to remember that facilities is now under you. What have you done? I think there was an increase in maybe some cyclical facilities investments.
There was,
$50,000, is that right?
What,
$50,000, I think, yearly, or am I forgetting?
No, that's correct. It was an additional amount that was added to the line item budget. And I'm going to go back to what Councilor Erickson said earlier too. If you would like us to come back and give a more formal presentation as it relates to the facilities budget, we'd be happy to do that. Recognizing your time is tight, but we'd be happy to come back with a more formal presentation. But you're right, it was $50,000 was added to that cyclical program.
And my question was just more or less, was that just, the driver was just a recalculation of how much you think you need to just keep up with the cyclical replacements of furnaces and all of that stuff?
I mean, it's never enough. I mean, there's just always cyclical replacement issues that are come up. Anything you want to add to that, Reed?
And maybe since he's coming up anyway, are we still executing to there's a big book, a facility study that we did where they looked at all the buildings and there's kind of like things to replace?
Yeah, Reed Holson from Human Resources Manager, Facilities Management. That 50,000 is an increase because City Center is coming off of warranty, basically. We've had that building for a year, so we're anticipating some potential needs and cyclical repairs for City Center in the coming years. So that's where that's going to be dedicated to. And as far as judging the facilities, we did that about 2 years ago, where we judged all the facilities and the health of facilities, and we worked directly with the finance department very interactively to plan our maintenance issues and make sure that we take care of all our facilities every year with our funds that we have. So we plan it out very, very, very carefully.
Okay, that's good enough for me. Thanks. Yep, thanks.
Okay. Counselor Starr.
Yes, if I can follow up, and this is probably more finance than, because you go first, you get all the weird questions by the time we're running through the budget book, but there's maybe Tom's the best one to answer this. There's a considerable difference also in utilities for the department. You're in the same amount of space and things, so the utilities line is up 130%. It's not a lot of money, but it's the question, are we seeing an overall increase in utilities of how, not of doubling, I wouldn't expect, so.
The HR guy will defer the utilities question.
That's what I thought you'd want to do.
Tim Condo with the City Finance Office. Utilities on average are pretty flat across the board. It's probably an actual to budget trending adjustment going on inside of that budget. So.
Well, it's just, when you look back at the 17 numbers versus 18, 19, and 20, it's kind of getting a feel for how we allocate. I guess I'm looking for an overall answer as much as I am for.
Utilities are pretty flat. We've been pretty lucky with the inflationary environment to having our utilities be pretty flat across the city, so.
Okay, then is there a quick explanation then why this one seems out of whack a little bit?
Is it down?
No, it's up 130%, 133.2%.
So it's probably just us getting an adjustment to the city center coming online and seeing what the actual trends were that, because we were estimating that back in the 19's budget because that wasn't online then. So a lot of it's just kind of a true up for that adjustment.
Now it makes sense. Thank you.
Anybody else? I've got a couple quick questions. I won't beat a dead horse too hard here, but back to our star position of the presentation, this cultural officer. Is there a precedent for this in like any neighboring cities somewhere close that has a similar one where you?
I don't have an immediate
No.
city that I can share with you that, yes, they have one. There are, obviously, they're out there.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're in the corporate, but I was just thinking, you know, we compare a lot of the other things we do to Fargo and Rapid and these kind of things. I was just curious if they had a similar position or, and I guess I'm asking it for this reason. Is it If there's turnover per an employee, what's the cost generally, like 20,000 per, have I
Can be
heard
20,
that
I mean,
number?
you can hear anywhere upwards of 40% of the cost of the position is something you'll often hear, but yeah, 20,000 is not.
Because I was thinking if there was something where we were good at comparing other towns and positions, if there was something that showed that retention for employees by somebody that had this position, I mean, obviously if it made up 6 or 7 employees, it pays for the position, so I don't know. I'm not trying to tell you how to sell it exactly, but I would think if there's a way to tie all this in together.
Right, and obviously that is the idea. We enjoy low turnover at the city of Sioux Falls, and it's one of those things that you don't always look at what's going wrong. You want to keep your foot on the gas pedal in those areas that are going strong as well, and also try to then improve it. I mean, that's the whole idea behind the employee engagement process is developing the environment for which your employees can thrive and do their jobs well. And again, keep low productivity or low turnover, high productivity. I mean, those are the concepts that are behind positions like that. And I'll be happy to go back and find some additional support.
I mean, more
to help
important area
further
than our
explain,
people. So I mean, obviously, if it does good, it does good. Going to employment stats. So you talk about like the turnover rate, and there's a full turnover rate, and then without retirees. And you talked about Rapid City in comparison; they were at 10.7. Is that total, or is that without retirees?
That was total.
Total. Okay. But overall, we've got a pretty strong number. 5% is something you're usually pretty happy with if it sticks around there?
Absolutely.
Okay. And when you say 1,280 employees, and we have 247 part-time, is that included in the 1,280?
It is not. That would be separate.
On top, okay. Gotcha. All right, thank you very much. Oh, Councilor Erickson.
Sorry, one more thing. I noticed, obviously, the mayor's not here, and I noticed TJ's not here, but I do see Chief of Staff Beck sitting in the back. I don't know if maybe you had more information, being Chief of Staff, about this position maybe that you wanted to add. Sorry, I didn't see you hiding in the back.
I'd be happy to address that. I didn't want to interrupt Bill's presentation. Thanks for having us. You know, the Chief Culture Officer is an important position to the mayor and the mayor's office. We actually just had an opportunity to visit Lemonly this morning. I don't know if you're familiar with that company, but it's located just over here on Main Avenue. And one of the things that I thought was really intriguing about a comment that John Meyer made, who's the founder of Lemonly, is that culture is the DNA of how you do things. So many of you have heard me talk about the importance of the how we do things matters. And that's really the heart of this position. This position is going to focus on not only helping our team members understand how to create that how environment that creates engagement amongst our team members and puts them in a position where they can provide more solutions and ideas moving forward, but it also sets them up to impact our entire community and all of the residents that live here. Because if they're focused on the how, we're focused on the how, we're impacting every single resident in our community. And so this position is going to focus on a number of different things. Things that we necessarily haven't had the opportunity to place emphasis and focus on in the past because we haven't had that leader in and on our staff to do so. So leadership development, that's incredibly important. All of you know that. You all go to conferences every year. These team members on our staff don't always have the opportunity to go to conferences every year. This person in this position will be able to provide different resources based upon the data that we're receiving through Pecan to understand what kinds of development opportunities and training opportunities are needed for our team members so that they can do their jobs more effectively and in turn impact all of our residents. That's just one piece of this position. That help?
Thank you. Councilor Starr?
Yes, thank you. That's insightful. I guess I'm interested because I think we asked earlier about the job description, but what do you see this person's background, where they would be coming from? You know, you try to balance $80,000 plus expenses. is a lot, but it's not in comparison to a department director who I would see doing these type of things and being able to do that and focus on it. So give me an idea of what the mayor's looking for in this position, or what that person would have for experiences and background to do that. And would it be someone that would be a current city employee, or would it need to be someone that would come from the outside?
Good questions. Thank you for asking that. You know, the background in these types of positions can vary based upon different experiences that they might have. I think the most important background experience that we're looking for is just that, it's experience. You have to, in this type of a position, be able to relate to all different levels of staff and help understand what direction they need to go in terms of development, and understand what resources are out there, either locally or nationally, to get them the experience and the training and the development that they need. That's just one example. There are lots of consultants across the country, as you're probably aware, and even here locally, that do this same type of work. So the background can vary widely. Leadership development, organizational development, training, leadership, all of those types of educational experiences would also be helpful.
Councilor Staley, do you have a question?
Well, so, Erica, as the chief of staff, I see you kind of doing those things already. We've had a situation with some employees, and you're involved with that, working with them. So how does your job description differentiate between this?
You know, there's a saying out there that says that when everyone owns it, no one owns it. That's the point of this position. All of us are responsible as leaders across our areas of work and expertise to influence and lead people. So I completely agree with you. I do that every single day, and we expect all of our department directors to do that as well as all of our team members. But without someone to really focus and emphasize the needs across the board for all of our team members when it relates back to what we're hearing through Pecan, just as an example, as to what our employees' needs are, it's really difficult to find the focus and efforts to do that. That's not my full-time job, nor is it every director's full-time job, as you can imagine. They lead and they coach their people every single day, but they don't have a focus on understanding across the broad spectrum of all of our different city departments what kinds of comprehensive training and development needs are out there. That's what this person will be able to do.
Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, we'll move on to presentation of the Director of Innovation and Technology. Welcome, Jason.
Afternoon. Anybody need a break? That was intense. Good job. 2020, where I'm about 9 months into the new position here, so this is my first budget. I decided to keep it very short and sweet for you so you can ask plenty of questions. Just a little bit about, this is only 6 slides, but there's a few transitions, so it looks a little fuller than it actually is. I wanted to give you an idea. A lot of you have heard a lot of these pieces, but just an idea of where we've come these last 8 or 9 months. We started off by launching the community dashboard. This was one of the very first BHAGs. I think Health Department beat us to it with the AARP certification, but this is number 2 off the checklist of the BHAGs. This page has been viewed by 30,000 unique visitors, with a total of about 40,000 page views total. So huge success in terms of engagement, and I think it serves the purpose really well. Tons of people click the more info button and move on to the open data page. Shortly after that, in fact, before that, we launched this one-link Sioux Falls app, another huge success. Close to 8,000 issues resolved over the since February. So really, really cool, really unique. The employees love it because the photos that describe the issue really allow them to hone in on the type of service that they're going to offer. Whereas in the past, the phone call, it was tough for them to determine the difference between a frost boil and a pothole, for example, over the phone. But this is perfect. A picture is a perfect way to describe that, and also the geolocation. These people can drive straight to it and solve it. So just more efficiency and effectiveness out of our staff. Obviously, the transit core team was set up and established. I want to give a special shout out to the counselors that have participated in some of those stakeholder sessions. Hundreds and hundreds of interviews. You guys heard from Allie a couple weeks ago. So far, this process has been thoroughly enjoyable, and I think we're making some meaningful progress on this thing. Super important issue, and I hope we can solve it. We just launched a couple weeks ago with the help of our intern, who happened to be from Harvard, a housing stat dashboard. This is collaboration with the Planning and Development Department and Shelley especially. But she's got a BHAG, an aggressive BHAG of 1,000 dwelling units. And this tool, which is on the main page of our website, is a dashboard that says exactly how we can get that. So, kind of the theme of using data to drive decisions. You'll hear that a few more times. We're pretty proud of this construction project web pages that we've had, and the email updates. Coming from a private sector is very tough to get people to opt into emails, and we've had a little over 7,000 people voluntarily opt in to the email updates. So I think it proves its importance and value to people. And the best part is it's completely, on their free will to do that. So we think that that's been a good success. And then finally, tons of positive feedback from the text notification system for both the snow removal and the mosquito spray. Again, voluntary. Our opt-in rate was much higher than we thought. So this is a quick snapshot of what my group has worked on these last 8 months. Pretty proud of this little portfolio of accomplishments and hoping to do some more in the future. So just the future-looking BHAGs and initiatives that we're proposing as a department. First one is, again, the BHAG was the community dashboard, but we're trying to launch into a community dashboard kind of 2.0, which is to take the same concept, make it better, but also push it out to all the various departments. We want each department to have a dashboard, public facing, that the citizens that are the residents can look at and say, how are we doing as a department? So Streets Department has a great version of this. Our GIS team is using a lot of that data and pushing it out to a lot of different agencies. So hopefully by the end of the year, almost all the departments really would have a dashboard that has key indicators that live right on the main page. Obviously, another big initiative was the goal to launch some 5G network capabilities. I'm really happy to announce that this goal was set for February, but I'm happy to announce that we've already launched an initial network with AT&T for our first responders on their FirstNet network. So we've right now today got 20 units deployed across the city in various functions, and it's in pilot mode, just like anything. We're testing it, we're seeing the connectivity, but we're getting there. Also to note, we've got 10 permits in the queue for small cell applications and a plan to move forward from there. So well on our way on this BHAG. I spoke about the transit pilot, or the transit core team. As Allie presented to you guys a couple weeks ago, the key moment now is how do we do this pilot? And I'd love to have more conversations with any of you that have good ideas. Our core team is meeting regularly, probably more regularly now than we've met any time in these last 8 months. How do we do the pilot? Do we run it on Sundays? Do we run it on Saturdays? How do we do it? And to Councilor Erickson's point that I watched the presentation, I totally agree with you. What if it works and we try to take it away? We don't want to deal with that. So just looking for more partnership from you folks along with our team to roll this out, this coming year. Some of you have heard probably in the mayor's State of the City address about this What Works City certification. This is so big for the city. If we get What Works City certification, it means that we're using data to drive decisions. They have a really strict requirement course to make this happen. I think we've got 8 or 9 out of the initial 26 checked off. This is aggressive, and you'll hear more about our data analyst position. This would be something that person really fully owns. There's 3 standards of What Works City certification. I think less than 15 cities have the basic standard. We're hoping to hit that this year. So really looking forward to that. Community engagement, huge theme for us. As I started to say about our engagement with the web pages, and some of these things. This position that's in the book for a digital content specialist would really hone in on the community engagement piece. We've had huge success with some of our Facebook Live streaming, and we want to be really intentional about how we use social media to interact. One example, we hosted 3 in-person town hall meetings, and I think we got a total of about 500 residents to attend. We streamed or video recorded some of those. We had well over 6,000 views of those things, and so I just think the impact of community engagement through social media is just a growing trend, and we want to focus even more on that piece. A larger piece of the budget that we've got is this. It's $50,000 for a request for this ArcGIS Urban. What this tool does, and I've been through some of your council meetings, what this tool does is put a 3D visual to some of these proposed plans, and it integrates with our current GIS system. So instead of looking at a plan in 2D, we'll actually be able to in-house incorporate 3D images. So you'll be able to see questions like shadowing, which a lot of residents have. How does this structure, cast a shadow various times of the day? So to us, it's a really a no-brainer. It's a very, in my opinion, it's a very low cost for a high return. We typically, to get that type of work, would have to reach out to a consulting or architecture firm of some sort. Sometimes the turnaround on that is 3 to 4 weeks. We think we can turn this around in 2 to 3 days. So if we have a certain request for a shadowing diagram, this is a tool we're really excited about. And then finally, you'll see this if you go to City Center tomorrow. Matt Tobias and I have been working with Planning and Development Services on their BHAG, which is to increase our customer service feedback in City Center. We want our customers to have a great experience. With the help of the IT department, we've actually launched a simple rate your visit in Sioux Falls tool on an iPad that we're going to stand up right at the front door of City Center, and we're going to develop that baseline to figure out how we're doing. Initially, the data is going to be raw, and because we don't have a baseline now, but we'll be able to see times of day if people are pushing the green smiley face when we have somebody at the front desk versus red when we don't have somebody there. We'll start to get some of those insights. So I think the big piece is you can see almost every single one of our major initiatives do not really live in the innovation department. They're really cross-functional. When I first came to the city, the mayor had done a survey that said, what's the worst part about what we've got going on? And the number one theme was siloed. And what's the thing that you'd like to see happen? And the number one word was collaborative. And so I think, at the base of it, that's what the innovation department is really here for. We want to take these departments, infuse this energy of innovation into the departments, and just have all the customers, experience, success. So we've got 2 departments really under here. The first one is the technology piece of the budget. The next one is the communications piece. It's pretty straightforward. There's very little changes for the most part. As Bill has mentioned, 2, I guess, major changes. Really, it's 3 for full-time equivalents. The innovation coordinator and the GIS specialist that you'll see in here, those are net neutral to the budget. They're conversions. The innovation coordinator came from a vacancy in the mayor's office, and so absorbing that budget, that's Allie's position. The GIS position has lived in Public Works for the last several years, and they've been working in our department for several years. Making that person going from an interim status to full-time is that version. The brand new position for this budget is the data analyst position, and that's probably it's a position that I'm really excited about. I think a lot of the departments are. We got a small taste of it from our Harvard intern. He had a data analytics background, and we sent him out into the fire department, and we said, let's see what we can do here. He created a tool that if you backloaded in the data from the previous years would have predicted 85% of the fires that happen in commercial properties. And so what that means is a position like that can focus on a department. They're tight on resources of people just like anybody. We think that if we can help them target their code enforcements and searches, that they could focus on the properties that need it the most and not just a wide canvassing of it. So that's just like one, and he was only here for 10 weeks and he got this done. So we're really excited about what this could be full time. The consulting piece, is really professional services. When we stand up a project, for example, a new app, we could have our staff learn how to every piece of it, or we could bring in a consultant that really focuses in and that has experience in the area. And it's again going from 2 months of our staff learning it down into 2 to 3 weeks of somebody that knows what they're doing. So, and finally, the security testing increase in the book. You saw what happened in the city of Baltimore this year. That was an $18.4 million breach. Anything that we can do preventatively from the security side of things. You heard somebody mention the collaboration with DSU and the dark web position. The IT department is working alongside the police department on this and DSU to do some of this stuff, but we want to do more penetration testing. We want to see if our system's safe, secure, and so I think we could quadruple that budget and be very comfortable with the results from that. That's on page 15 of your big book. Page 16 of the big book has the communications budget breakdown. Again, very straightforward, only a couple major changes. The digital content specialists I spoke about, that's really a targeted focus on citizen engagement, resident engagement, mostly in the social media world. We've got a part-time person doing this now. She's doing an amazing job. We want to hit this from a full-time perspective. And then the franchise fee pass-through, when y'all voted to increase that, we actually pay that out of the communications budget, and the money that comes in goes to the general fund. So it's just a little bit of a pass-through. That's short and sweet. I want to leave plenty of time for questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Neitzer.
I have a number, so I'll do a few and then defer. Do we have anybody who would be like a security analyst or a security officer or something? Because in an organization this big, you could probably make a case for it. We
made a case for it through the RFR process. It didn't make its way to the light of day. We have one position for that. We'd like to expand that, and we'll do a good job about pushing that forward. We think that it's a great step to collaborate with the DSU piece. Right now, we've got, it's really a network team with a really strong one person dedicated to the security piece. She does a great job, but we'd like to expand that.
Is that person, I mean, constantly, I mean, like in where I work day after day, I'm getting alert after alert after alert, and then I have to go in and patch software. We have somebody who's taking like a holistic view, like, oh, here's another Windows vulnerability. I gotta.
Correct.
Yeah.
We have one position for that now. We think that we can get a lot of the work done through her relationship with some consulting and also through the partnership, but I expect that to be an ask in future budget years.
Okay. Next, communication in CityLink. There's 2 employees over there. I assume, do they report directly to Grace then?
Correct.
Okay, she's her supervisor.
Correct.
Are we doing, and maybe it's not an either or, but are we doing enough to use, we have significant investment in CityLink. Are we using and harnessing that enough? I mean, I understand the Facebook Live and wanting to use different channels, but what I don't want to see is we do a Facebook Live and you have to have Facebook to use it. And then we have the channel sitting over here where we have a lot of time that we could be filling. I'd like to see multiple modes so everybody has an opportunity to see some of these things.
100% of those videos are through are available through our site, through our YouTube channel. Not all of them make sense for production on the CityLink channel itself, but we're talking about launching the City of Sioux Falls app on Roku and some of these other devices to make it very agnostic in terms of where you can view the content. But yeah, I mean, as anything, it can be more. These 2 guys are responsible for 100% of the filming, editing, production, all that piece, all those pieces. A lot of the things that they struggle with is writing the actual content for these things. We don't have anybody necessarily dedicated to telling stories. We rely on the directors and certain employees that are good at it to do that. But we think that in future years, to get more content onto the site, I think you'd have to have a dedicated content writer or creator, executive type of person.
So if you do a Facebook Live, does that end up on our YouTube channel?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And our site, the CityLink site.
And then when you mentioned that some things won't work, is that because the quality isn't good enough that for broadcast it wouldn't look good? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Or the audio, perhaps? The audio might not be very good?
Audio is a factor. I mean, a lot of the Facebook Live is done on a cell phone, and so the production value is just pretty low compared to some of the other more finished product that's done with 4K cameras.
Which again, we have expensive cameras and stuff. If anytime we can get those CityLink guys out there and recording, in addition to or in conjunction with the Facebook Live, just.
These guys are in high demand. They are working their butts off all over the city. They are cruising around everywhere. I mean, I wish I could have 4 more of them because we could get more footage covered for sure.
And then before I defer, digital content specialists, do we know what the pay is going to be?
We do.
Or the range or the.
With.
Maybe with and without benefits, I guess.
We just got the total. The digital content specialist is $68,594.
Inclusive of benefits? Okay. So that must be just what is that, a base of like 40 salary or something?
Somewhere
40,
in there.
50?
It's
I mean, just ballpark 40, 50 probably.
ballpark 45K plus benefits-ish.
Okay. So I don't want to oversimplify it. Obviously, engaging people in new ways is really important in this day and age. But is it somebody that's just going to be tweeting and posting Facebook stuff? And I mean, again, same challenge. Is there somebody in the office who already?
We have a part-time person in mind that's doing this right now. She's doing an amazing job. She's limited to 28 hours a week, and we want to unleash her full-time on this. And she's going out strategically, investing into all the different departments, asking the Parks Department, how can we make your program better? And the Parks Department's saying, why didn't we get very many signups on this posting, or through this link? And she's saying, well, this code was different, or if this time of day would be better. And so it's really working with every department to work on their social media presence, ultimately to serve their programs, which is, to get people to sign up and engage in their programs. So we're already working on it. We just are looking for a little bit more.
How long have you had her working in a part-time capacity?
2 or 3 months, I think. And she showed me a great chart, pre her starting. The gaps and spikes of engagement were really wide, and now they're very consistent. And so just a more regular posting schedule, somebody dedicated to this is really helping in that regard.
Okay, I'll defer. Thank you.
Councilor Erickson.
I'm going to piggyback off of that position, and then I have a couple other questions. So does she do it for every single department right now currently? So she does it for PD, she does it for the general government. I don't know if she does it for Mayor Paul, or how does that work?
So most departments, like PD does a great job on their own. They've already had that established. Fire department has a good established. She's mostly focused on the departments that don't have a great reach or resource and want a little more help with that, but she's having discussions with. The idea is that she serves every department. Mayor Paul's kind of on his own. He does, he does a lot of it on his own page. We're talking about the City of Sioux Falls page specifically and how we can engage that audience.
Okay. Because there's a lot coming out already right now, so I guess maybe they would just be more pointed for the other departments or whatever if this position's approved. Because there's more content than I've ever seen, and I like it. I like seeing it on social media, but I'm telling you that there's a large population that is missing a lot of stuff, and I would say, and I don't want to put an age number on it, but certain demographics that maybe is not as active on Facebook really miss CityLink and the content that has been put out in the past on CityLink. And so anytime we can utilize CityLink, there's a lot of closet watchers is what I generally refer them to, because they'll come up and say, I saw you on TV. I'm like, I wasn't on TV. Well, CityLink is where they get a lot of their information and really utilize that. So anytime that we can use that equipment, I think is
completely agreed. It's a stat in your book. We produced more minutes this year on CityLink than we did in any year past, and the trend is headed in that direction. So
yeah, appreciate it. Okay, and then I'm going to ask first time the transit stuff that you're doing with that. Will you or any of the team be here when Sam presents his transit budget?
Yes.
Okay.
I will be here for sure. I assume some of the other members will be too.
Okay, just making sure, because I just think that commingles so much of making sure that that message of what you guys are doing is the same message in which the budget that he's bringing forward.
We have an amazing relationship with Sam, the person, and Sam, the agency. And we have brought their operations manager into our core team. He sits on our core team meetings for that exact reason. At the end of the day, what we're doing is a pilot that may or may not work. Right? We think it's going to work. We're doing our best to make sure that it works. But if it doesn't, we still have to have a plan moving forward. And so we are really running in parallel with the transit department, in general. And so we want to make sure that we're making good choices, not buying buses if we're not going to need to buy buses. We kind of halted the plan for building out remodeling the SAM agency. Some of those choices that we can make, like preventatively, we're in good contact. So, but great point, and I've got some comments on the transit budget, that I've been trying to talk. But this is changing fast, right? We're learning every single time we have a stakeholder session. And so the budget process has to move forward. Absolutely. And so we have to plan accordingly in case it doesn't work.
No, and I appreciate that and really appreciate all the players in that task force, because it's a huge issue and we can't just sit back on our heels and do nothing. I mean, you have to try something. So I'm appreciative of that. My last 2 points and want you to expand on, I'm on page 15 of innovation and technology budget, and I want you to talk a little bit about the professional services that's increased 30%. I know you touched on it a little bit, but talk about that a little bit. And then I'd also like you to address the training and education budget, because it has really bounced around a lot. So has professional services over the years. And I know your group your departments have changed over time, and I know that plays into some of it. But just want a little bit more dialogue on that, if you could, please.
Professional services, was this a recharacterization, John, of some of the previous rental budget? Can John talk on the professional services?
Absolutely.
John Clemmy, IT manager. So the professional services budget really focuses on key projects that we have, such as Outlook or Exchange upgrades, system upgrades that if we take the time to train our staff, it might take months to execute the training process, the testing scenario build up, and then execution of upgrading a product. So what we like to do is condense that time dramatically and hire professional services to come in and do that one-time lift. So for example, Exchange going from 2018 to 2020, whatever the versions are, they would come in, provide us with the expertise on how to configure that and in a condensed amount of time. So we're utilizing our dollars much wiser and executing much faster.
Perfect, thank you. Then I'll let Director follow up on the training and education.
Training and education, this has been, I was a little bit surprised when I inherited the previous budget as to how I thought light it actually was based on the number of employees that we have. We've got about 60 some employees on this team, roughly 60,000 or so in budget. So a typical trip would normally cost you around 3,000. So that's about a third of the team. If everybody took one trip, about a third of the team that would actually stand to benefit from a training opportunity. A couple of pieces by adding me as the innovation director and Allie as the innovation coordinator. The stuff that we're doing is not being done anywhere around here, regionally especially. And so I think a lot of our focus on travel is to some of the conventions in places that are doing it. The good news is about this, I would expect the majority of the increase to be recouped through sponsorships. We've got a great relationship with Bloomberg and some of these partners. In fact, a trip I have later this year is being sponsored by the Aspen Institute. It comes out of our budget. We have to have it come out of our budget, and then it gets reimbursed into the general fund. And so even though it shows an increase in training for us, we're expecting it to be a net neutral to the budget overall.
But you still get paid by the city while you're gone.
Correct.
I mean, it's still part of the processes that you're still, anyone who does obviously gets paid for that, whether it's reimbursed or not, so.
100%. The people that we're sending to these things are people that we expect to have multiple multiple times ROI that comes back from these things, and be able to spread a training from one person to an entire team. Instead of sending 5 people, if we send one person that's really good at telling the story and bringing back company-wide, we think the return on this is very high for the people that we send to these things.
And that's key, absolutely key to the area.
Part of my requirement as if you are going to be traveling is to come back with a report. What did you learn? What did you like about it? What did you hate about it? Was the value worth it? Who else should know about this? How do we get it out? And so for me, there's a process. Knowing how valuable it is, and the training budget is tight, or I think citywide. We want to be real intentional about these trips that we're taking.
Right, and I appreciate your candidness and openness with it. And please don't hear me or anyone in the city thinking that I don't support professional development and training. I just know there's been a lot of chatter around the increase of travel and training throughout employees. And so for that, I want to just making sure that, hey, we're getting our best bang for our buck, and we can go back to the citizens and others and say, yeah, it's great. Here's what he did. And he trained his whole staff. Instead of sending 6 people, he went and he got to learn. And I'm not just picking on you. I'm saying, I asked the question of the other directors too, same thing, that we can prove that we're getting the best bang for our buck out of that. Because again, it's not that I don't support it. It's just, I've been here for over 5 years, and I've seen us in tough budget times where that was the first thing that got cut from many different budgets. And so I've seen it be a roller coaster of a lot of people going places to no one, to maybe a couple. Okay, now we're doing a lot again. And so just that perception of me watching it over the last 5 years for all the departments has just been interesting to just be able to communicate to our constituents why and what.
Coming from the private sector, where every dollar that you saved went to the bottom line in terms of profit, that's the way that I operate this thing. We're not trying to go travel just to travel. Very intentional about this. If you ask any one of my employees, the first thing I ask them when they have a travel request is, can we be a keynote speaker at this thing and get this thing paid for? Right. Because I personally think that there's so many things that we're doing that we actually are content experts on. This should be, instead of going to these things as an attendee, we should be going as a presenter. And so we are pushing very hard on that aspect.
Thank you.
Councilor Staley.
Jason, on the pothole hotline, do you know offhand how much we pay? Tenhagen had mentioned that we're paying for those calls. Right. And I thought he said it was anywhere from $3 to $5. Correct. He wasn't quite sure, so.
$4.50. Well, so it depends. Like if it's the 367-8000 number, we pay $3 a call. If they call the general hotline after hours, it's $5 a call. So I think that's the range that you see.
And I think Councilor Erickson was kind of getting towards this next thing I'm going to say. When coming from people my age or older, is that a lot of people I know are not into the app. They're not into taking the photo as they're driving by a pothole, okay? And I get you're catching that energy, and I know it's here in our city, but I will always be an advocate for human contact. You can't replace talking to someone, and at some point, I mean, that's never going to go out of style, okay? So I'm here to say, let people use their phone. And if they want to walk in and talk to someone, we have to continue to have that as an important priority in our city.
I completely agree with you. I think there should be multiple ways to contact the city. This is just one of them that never existed before. I believe that the majority of the 8,000 responses that were fixed were from first-time users that had never. There's certain people that will never pick up the phone and call anybody. Right? It's a text or whatever. And so I think that there's no reason not to have all of them. But in terms of straight up bang for the dollar, we serviced, for example, 8,000 calls for $3,000. Those same 8,000 phone calls would have cost us $40,000. So I think there's a real dollar value into trying to scale up our resources.
And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have that as an option. I think that's great, but I don't ever want to lose the other part. And again, people are contacting me, as I mentioned earlier. You heard me talking about that ombudsman idea, that there are people who, even though they may have an app and that that opportunity to communicate that way. They still reach out to us personally when there's an issue. Not everything can be solved through technology. So we want to keep the personal touch as a priority.
My priority is not to eliminate the phone number. My priority is to create as many opportunities for contact as possible and make that experience great, whether it's on the phone or whether it's on the app or whether it's via email.
And then, John, can I ask John to say something? Come on up, John. Just for I want to say thank you, and I know some of my colleagues have had this very issue when it comes to email capacity. And so I've saved every email I've ever gotten from a council member or from a constituent, even though I know we have this archive thing that I've never used. But just so we know that we have an ability within our city to increase the email capacity. And they increased mine to the point where now I'm like rich when it comes to territory on my email. So thank you for that. And just so my colleagues, if you ever get into a point where your email is full, talk to John and he can give you that little added program of how many gigabytes or how do you say, megabytes, dillabytes?
There's additional capacity,
Zigabytes.
certainly, but I'm still going to win you over on the archiver.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I'll just mention that the increased capacity is not free. And we pay every single one of the emails that lives on a server, and those are probably our number one expense. Like if you wanted to save millions of dollars of the budget, let's limit people's emails. However, it is possible. The archiver will do the same thing for, again, we can save 1,000 emails for every one on the actual server.
Jason, just for clarification, I'm not costing them $1 million by having my emails.
No.
And if for constituents, for referencing the history of where that we've been, to be able to access that, I think that is something that we need to do as council members to do our job better. But I would like to see in the budget where that's costing $1 million to have, because I have a Yahoo account that I pay nothing for, and I've had that thing for years, and I have gobs of emails on there. They've never come back and said I've reached capacity. So if Yahoo can do it for free, the city of Sioux Falls can do it for me.
Fair enough. Yahoo lives in the cloud. Our emails are archived in the server, and that's a major difference. Security is a factor for our IT department. One of the most important factors for our department, the most secure version of storage is in the servers. So it's millions of dollars is a miscalculation. That's an exaggeration, but it does cost money.
And we have to be careful when we use exaggerations, right?
Agree.
Just like when I said that we may have a $300 a month sewer bill. Okay, that was an exaggeration. So you just gave the $1 million as an exaggeration to make your point, right?
100%.
Got it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Next, Director Pritchett. Long time no see.
I know we are limited on time, so we'll walk through this here. We are good on time?
We got time.
Okay. I didn't know if, okay, perfect. So I'm going to present the entertainment tax fund piece, and then I also want to make mention, we do have Mike Cruson here from SMG, who is available to answer questions that come up as it relates to the property, the facilities that they manage, primarily at the events complex there. And then we also have Darren Smith and some of his staff in the Washington Pavilion, and they can answer some questions you might have in relation to the Washington Pavilion and the Orpheum Theater as well. So just wanted to make you aware that they were here and available for that. For 2020, in your budget book, you'll see that we have forecasted approximately $8.7 million of entertainment tax revenue. So this would be that third penny that would be coming in and is dedicated to the task of specifically for the entertainment tax fund. We have estimated, similar to our sales tax side, a 4% increase for the 2020 budget when we conceptualize what the revenue would be coming in. And just as a kind of reminder, we go through this on a monthly basis, but where we've been in terms of the total entertainment tax dollars. So year to date through 2019, we're actually up 7.7%. That's year over year. We're up 6.6% on a rolling 12-month average. So we're seeing right now our receipts coming in on the entertainment tax side at a stronger and even a faster pace than our general sales tax has been coming in. So there's been strong upward momentum there, but we did just conservatively and reasonably estimate that at 4% for the budget. I know I showed this to you with the state theater, but again, reiterating, similar to the general fund, we do look at that entertainment tax fund on a very long-term basis. We look to estimate out what our capital and operating needs are going to be and ensure that we have enough funds that are available in that entertainment tax fund to meet those needs long-term, even if they happen to be capital needs that might be 10 or 15 years out. As we dig in specifically into the actual budget proposal for this year, so total expenditures from the entertainment tax, which includes both capital and operating dollars, is $10.3 million. About 25% of that, or 1/4, is operating support. So not all facilities encumber operating support with the entertainment tax fund. So, for example, the event center, we don't program funding for operating shortfalls there because it's been able to maintain its own operations just through its operating accounts with that particular entity. But we do provide operating support to the zoo partially. Most of that is funded out of the general fund. The Washington Pavilion, and ongoing with the baseball stadium, we do allocate a certain amount for operating support related to that, as well as the Orpheum Theater. Other operating support you can see on the slide there, that's primarily, in most cases, repairs and maintenance. It's a little bit of a supplies and materials, but typically that's where you're going to see those type of expenses show up. Looking specifically at each of the individual event complexes. So the event complex portion of the entertainment tax, that includes, of course, the Premier Center, the Convention Center, and the arena. Their total budget is up about $1.1 million. This is driven mostly on the capital side, so that piece of it is up about $500,000 in 2020 versus 2019. In addition, you can see the repair and maintenance and supplies and materials is up about $400,000. So those are the portions. We don't provide any operating support in relation to this particular facility. There has been, so a lot of with the R&M, the capital, that just is based on whatever the maintenance and capital planning needs are for that particular facility. So we sit down every year and we go through them in great detail and depth and try to figure out what can be programmed in and what the needs are in the immediate future. The other thing, so we've highlighted some of the biggest ones that would be coming or programmed in for 2020. Those include the hockey ice joint and shield replacement that has been programmed to occur. There are some HVAC upgrades that have been incorporated this year, as well as the retention pond liner. The other thing I would point out, I believe the mayor discussed it in his presentation, is there had been some funding set aside in the event of next steps coming out of the events task force. This relates to the convention center, it relates to the arena, it relates to all portions, but we ended up just putting it under the event center side for budgeting purposes. Those dollar amounts were just put in there as a placeholder. We don't have specific, we don't have the report, so we don't have a specific idea of what those might be utilized for, but we expect there may be some professional services that are needed coming out of that, whether it's a study, an architectural study or something of that nature. So that amount was set aside specifically, but I can't tell you that it's for a specific item yet. So it is a placeholder within the budget. Also, as part of that events complex portion of the entertainment tax, you'll see the convention center capital highlights as well. So we have $1.4 million program for capital expenditures, primarily with lighting system upgrades, floor box, and electrical upgrades that it's just getting to that age and time period where those need to be updated. Acoustical panels, so we want to make sure that our convention center remains refreshed and is also competitive and attractive for attracting business as well as conventions to our community. And then also a boiler replacement. Again, we're getting to that time frame where some of these mechanical systems are in need of replacement. It seems to be the year of the boiler because we have a lot of boilers that are programmed in. And I feel a little bit like Oprah where everybody gets a boiler, instead of a car. So arena, maybe you get a boiler. and that is dependent, I'll make that note, because depending on what the results of the event task force coming in, we wouldn't be replacing a boiler unless it's a complete shutdown. We would be looking at specifically, we program the money in, but if something comes out and says, well, we're not going to keep the arena long-term, that is going to be reassessed. So it's an identified need for the facility, but it's kind of like buying buses for the transit system. We are watching those very closely and not moving or executing forward on those unless we know that we're not investing money in something that is going to change significantly in the short term. So we want to be cognizant of that the money is being utilized wisely. As far as the Orpheum Theater, this is the first year in which Washington Pavilion Management, Inc. would be the full-time managers of this facility. You can see in terms of their overall budget, their total budget is up 37%, but again, this is driven on the capital portion, and so that portion is up $184,000, I believe. But the total operating is down by about $146,000, and this reflects some of the changes we made on the management side. As far as this boiler, it really does, it's years from have been needing to be replaced. So that is really a key part of their capital program for next year, as well as some security system updates that need to be done, both for that, but we also have CityLink located in this facility, and it's important for that, as well as some network updates. And then finally, somewhat similar to the arena situation, the Sioux Falls Stadium, we continue to be looking at what the long-term plans are for this facility. So the total budget for this facility is down $68,000. Operating support is up just very slightly. But a lot of the operating support has been absorbed by the events complex. So we haven't actually, we program for operating support because we can't always anticipate that the event center is going to do so well. It's just going to absorb the losses for the baseball stadium. So for that particular facility, we do program those losses in the event that they were necessary. Major investments that we occurred, so we're going to be down about $200,000 in R&M from where we were in 2019. We did do some fairly significant projects. We had some significant conversation about that and some concerns on your part, which were fair, how much we invest in this facility long-term, but they were all health and safety issues, and they do have a netting project that will be underway too as well, with some of the concerns people had with just balls coming off of the field and so forth. So that is moving forward, but we do see a reduction in the R&M budget for next year. And again, we're continuing to watch those expenses. The only capital item was coolers and fryers, so we'll be careful on executing that as well, but beer and chicken is very important to baseball, I think, so keep those coolers and fryers working. Finally, the Washington Pavilion expenditures, you can see here. The overall budget for the Washington Pavilion is down by $231,000. This is driven primarily by a $114,000 reduction in the capital side and a $214,000 reduction on the repair and maintenance side. Again, as I talked about with the event center, there's some cyclical needs, and we just watch those carefully, working directly with the management on what their maintenance and capital plans are, making sure we're appropriately planning for each of those items. There is a 1.5% small inflationary increase in terms of the operating support that the city is providing to Washington Pavilion Management, Inc. The other thing I would point to, and I did allude to this in a prior presentation, and you can see it in kind of our modeling for the entertainment tax fund, but we do recognize that there could be a significant expense, not in 2020, but maybe 2021, 2022, related to the cornice and parapet surrounding the top of the Washington Pavilion. So there is design work underway. You've probably seen that on the consent agenda as they continue to review that particular item and what that expense is. So, and we're looking at the most cost-effective ways of being able to replace that item, but we want to make sure that it also doesn't become a health and safety issue. Finally, just touching upon the Event Center Study Group. I know that Councilor Sale has been actively involved in that group. From my understanding, the report is expected to be issued later this month, but as I noted, we did program at about $150,000 for professional services, which you'll see noted into the Events Center budget. And of course, the focus areas are expected based on the prior meeting, arena and convention center being probably the highest priority, and then follow-up discussions on transit and transportation, the baseball park, and then development of the adjacent area. The last thing I'll mention, and then I'll open it up for questions, is we've talked about this previously, but one of our second goal for finance, our BHAG, is to achieve break-even combined net operating results for the 6 entertainment venues for the city. And I think we're going to be making some additional progress on this, hopefully in the next year. I think we're in a good place as we continue building toward that. We know that we're always going to be in that position where we have to support the facilities from a capital standpoint, but really working, we've seen great success with those organizations. I think with some of the changes that continue to be made and the leadership shown with our great third-party partners, we'll continue to make progress on this particular goal here as well. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you again, Director. Everybody gets a boiler.
Everybody
Good
gets
stuff. Questions?
I was going to do my impression, but I thought I'd hold back.
Yeah, next time. Director, I'm calling you. Councilor Neitzer.
Promotion. Going directly to your BHAG, the report isn't written, but having watched the video and talked to a couple people on the task force, it's clear what the recommendation is going to be for the arena. So we have time, but would there be a possibility that you think we ought to just delete the arena OSEP and boiler replacement? I will just be transparent. I fully have thought before they even had the task force, it's time to sunset it. I don't know if you tear it down, but that would get towards your BHAG. That would get you 500,000 or 600,000 there, I think.
It is, from that perspective, yes. I mean, there is some losses there, but there is fixed overhead cost. I mean, SMG manages multiple facilities, so they distribute their fixed overhead between the different facilities. So as we kind of talked about when even the Orpheum transitioned over to the Washington Pavilion, you know, some of that could be expenses that are gained back. Some of it is just reallocated back to some of the other facilities too.
And then when this comes to us, is this coming to us in the form of, is somebody going to present it at the city council at a meeting or an informational? Do you know how this is going to look? I don't know that you're the point man on this.
No.
But
TJ has primarily been involved in the event center study task force, so, and I wasn't able to attend the last meeting.
Okay.
But I'm assuming there probably would be there would be a briefing at the time.
Yeah, because I'm going to be curious as far as, I'll let maybe councilors say, I'll get to it, because I'm going to be curious as far as like next steps when it's presented to us somehow, you know, because then we have some decision, there's going to be some big stuff, and like, for example, we have a time frame here. Now, of course, we don't have to spend the money. We can authorize it but not spend it, but, you know, like, if we decide that we're going to go with the recommendation to do something or nothing with the arena, you know, things like that, so maybe if.
Just if I may. The intent is on August 21st for the committee to take their last meeting, which they will reach a consensus on the recommendations. Okay. Then they will wrap it up in a nice bow and they will present it to the city council at a date. I'm not sure when it will be, but I'm pretty sure it will be quickly after the 21st.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilor Erickson.
Statement and a question. I was a little bit surprised to see that the zoo is still being funded with entertainment tax, because I know that that's been all over the board from previous administration to this administration, and it was done in a maneuver by this council to fund some priorities that we wanted to. But I thought maybe at some point it would be removed back out of there in the general fund. My question is there an entertainment tax reserve fund? Is there, like, you want to keep 5%, or is there a goal in mind? Is that written down? Is it just internal? How does that work, and what is it if it exists?
So unlike our general fund, there's not a specific policy set by the city council in regard to it. I know when we looked at it, we'd like to see at least $2 million in that fund, just so that we can absorb an unforeseen expense, or if there's some shifting in some of the revenues that don't come in based on expectations. But yes, so we do try to keep that. We've talked internally that we try to keep that at $2 million, and that's excluding any funds that we would have deposited in SMG's operating account.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Councilor Staley.
Had to get some water there. First of all, let me get rid of my cough drop. Let me say that I had a great conversation with Darren Smith, and I want to, if we can show this, we've got our neighborhood summit coming up. I'm going to be passing these out at the picnics tomorrow, but we're going to be using the Orpheum Theater and Zabel, and Darren Smith and I had a nice conversation about a real economical situation, so that since we're paying for this, it's a city facility that we're going to get a real nice rate to have this summit. So it's going to be, mark your calendars, Saturday, October 5th, from 8 to 12. The mayor and I kind of worked together along with Councilor Janet Brecky to pull this together for the neighborhoods to come together and have some energy, which is great. Going back to this event center campus situation, there's a chance, maybe we should add this to the third possibility for bonding.
For that piece.
Well, that you could likely, you're going to have to come back, if you're going to be ripping something down and building something new, you would be coming back to us for another bonding request,
And without
right?
kind of knowing what the recommendations are, I know we haven't had specific conversations of what that would even look like without even, I feel like it would be putting the cart before a horse.
Right, but I mean, anything, if they're going to spend some money on something, where would that money, I mean, could they rip the event, let's say it's going to cost $3 million to rip it down, they could do that without bonding for it?
Yes, we would need to program that into the, it would be a bit of a heavy lift for the entertainment tax fund. We'd have to look at what all of our other priorities are and make sure we can make room for it. Let's say if it was $3 million for demolition and demolition only. Or if that's something that if you're just vacate the facility, if you say they decide you're going to replace the arena and eventually build it, that you wait till you get your full financial plan in place before you do.
Which brings up my next kind of a comment, informational thing for the public, because we've got the event center and you're giving us these figures about the operation and the third penny being involved. But what we have to keep coming back to is that thing is being sustained by our second penny. The facility was paid for with the second penny. And I think you said that it was an $8 million payment, some $8 million plus, right?
Yep.
So
that is supported by the second penny, that's correct. We support the capital and the maintenance of it through the entertainment tax fund.
So it's interesting because we built that thing, the event center we built with the second penny, and you were just talking about a heavy lift to replacing the arena with something with the third penny. You just said third penny.
For the repairs and maintenance and the capital side. It's something that could be considered for the bonding, but unless I know what a project is and what it costs, I can't begin to hypothetically say this is how we could afford to do this.
But could we build another an extension onto the convention center? If we rip the arena down and they want to make some more flat floor space for the convention center, can they use, how does the third penny, how could it feasibly be entered into as a component?
It could support pledging it as revenue for a bond. Just as we do the second penny, you could take the third penny and pledge it. But again, you'd have to know what the total project is that we're talking about and whether that particular fund could absorb that payment and whether it could be put into the overall financial package. So
Another option could be that you would come back and say, we want to use the second penny as the collateral for the bonding.
I have no idea until I would
like we did with the event
project.
center.
Second penny could be pledged potentially because it was for the event center, but that was
Or like it would be
$90 million
the River Greenway project or the safety center, which were those two things you've already said could happen.
Correct, yep. That would pledge the second penny for those particular projects. That would be for the bond issuance. That would be the only option that you would have in terms of pledging revenue for those projects.
So we would think that when we hear this report, they're going to have something in place about how this is going to be paid for. At that time, wouldn't you think?
I don't believe that is necessarily the, I don't know. I'd have to defer to Councilor Sale.
No.
No, there's going to be no price tag or anything, or request for monies?
I believe that we're at the point where there will be some recommendations made on the 21st. We're going to take a straw poll to see what the committee, how it's implemented and what the city does with it is totally up to us at that point. They're going to make some recommendations. You've seen that the city finance directors, they put some money in there for further studies because when it comes to architectural studies, engineering, this group is not That's not their task. So it's when they get with the mayor and present it and say, Mr. Mayor, you put the team together, here's what the recommendations is, eventually they come in front of the city council. That's when I believe that the studies will have to be done, the money will have to be allocated, that if we're gonna put in a roller coaster there, that has to be vetted on how much it's gonna cost, where the money's gonna come from. Those details are not part of the study.
So I heard you say that it's coming back to the city council.
That is my understanding. It's the mayor's committee. So go to the mayor, and then the intent of the chairs is to present it to the council and give their recommendations. That here's what we recommend.
So we could recommend to go to a public vote.
You can certainly, whatever the final details, they're not going to recommend that it's an 18-story building. They're not going to recommend it's a roller coaster. They're going to say, or tell you that. They're going to say, here's what we think is the best utilization for that property, for the city, for the future. And then we will, as a city council and the mayor's office, will have to determine whether we take those recommendations, put them in solid form, or whether they go another direction. There have been two blue ribbon panels previous to this one that made great recommendations to the city council that were not taken. And so that's always, we have to figure out as a council how to pay for anything that goes forward, whether we want to keep that as an entertainment venue, whether it's a roller coaster or a curling center, that's what we get to determine. They're going to give us their recommendation.
Councilor Starr.
Yes, thank you. I guess, Director, one of the things that I'd like to encourage us, and I know it's part of the budget process, but taking a look at just 2020, but just like the capital plan, I think you suggested at one time that you would come back with a plan of kind of what we're looking into the future with the third penny, and how we're kind of, this is the reserve part of it. It's not this big pot of money that's sitting there. We've got plans for it. And so I think that would help too, that just because we do see it as a pot of money, it's what we do. We're elected officials and we spend money. It's the only thing that we get to do fun that kind of fits that. So explaining that to us would help rather than just saying there's a large amount of money there. So if during this process, I think that would help, even if it was just an overall process or a quick 30,000 foot view of kind of here's how we're going. I know you gave us a little bit of that today with the 2 million, but I think a little deeper would help.
Well, and it goes back a little bit, if you bear with me here a little bit, when we talked this piece here, we are trying to encapsulate that as part of this. So, the left matrix portion of that, the vertices is where we believe the general fund balance would be over this period of time. And then we just tried to highlight the big capital projects that we anticipated were programmed into it. So you can see we expect that fund can grow significantly depending on those needs, but we also know that 5-10 years out, we're going to have some significant expenses with that event center as well. But again, our big pieces will be 2022, 2021 with the Washington Pavilion parapet that will have to be absorbed in the existing one.
Gotcha. Take me back to the slide with where we were, now that I made you flip all over the place. I forgot the number of it, just the overall.
Let's see. The overall for the fund, this one?
Yeah, I can go back. I forgot where we were at in that part of it. But I guess my question, the BHAG statement. That's a major switch in policy of where we're headed as a community, because one of those things that we did by doing that, then we're going to have to start charging rent for facilities where maybe in the past we were able to be more generous, whether it's community dance or different events, where our goal is totally getting to a place where we're at a net operating, a break-even net operating for the 6 facilities. And again, it's a policy thing that stands out to me, and I see that in the third penny or the entertainment things tonight. When we look, the Orpheum's a good example. In rentals in the past, the 2019 shows as a 0, where we're looking to project that we'll have $100,000 in rentals. That'll now come from groups in the past that may have had more affordable rental or hadn't paid rental in the past, or those combinations. And so that's my concern, is that we lose inexpensive locations for the arts. So more of a statement, but then when I back up in the same category with the Orpheum, we're going to have, we're projecting for the 2020 budget, 261,000 less in operating or professional services. What are we getting less? Did SMG, I mean, there just wasn't $260,000 to cut. So if we're going to save 261,000, what are we getting less from, or are we just taking advantage of the Washington Pavilion management?
I don't take advantage of them. I hope they don't feel like they're being taken advantage
More
of.
of my sense of humor. I apologize that I wrapped that in. You tried it earlier, a finance guy with jokes. I mean, I've appreciated that. So it's made the presentation a lot more fun.
There's a couple of pieces. I want to try to respond because there's different pieces of that, and I want to be really transparent on those pieces. So previously with the Orpheum, a lot of those losses, while we did budget for them, they were getting absorbed by the event center. So it's kind of like which hand is paying for it. It's either coming out of our SMG operating account or it's coming out of directly from Washington Pavilion. But what we tried to do with them and working with Washington Pavilion is we say, okay, we know this is your first year and we don't know exactly what this is going to look like. So we did program, it is less on the operating side. For how much they believe they would need to continue that operating support for that piece. But the 100,000 in rentals, to be clear, that's kind of a backstop in case we're off. So the rentals isn't like we're gonna go and charge necessarily more people more money to have to be able to rent the facility as much. It's not a revenue item, it'd be on the expense side. But we wanted to separate it off and say, okay, this is what our commitment to the Washington Pavilion is, but we don't know exactly how that first year is gonna go, and we wanna be fair to them. And so we kind of had that piece, again, lined out as kind of a placeholder, kind of like the study, the professional services piece, that we know that we have some backstop there in case that's the case. The other piece of your question is really new. It is a nuanced one, and it is a policy decision, because at what point, and you can look at this as so many factors. You can look at this at the convention center, like how much do we give away, space because we're bringing in a lot of people into the hotel. And I know that's an issue that they're continuing to work with the CVB on, so we have a coherent policy on that. But it's the same thing when we have a sports team that might be in our events complex. Is that, to what benefit are we doing, and could we be more profitable if we brought in 1 or 2 more concerts instead of having a sports team there? And where should the cities be sitting with that? So that is a very nuanced thing, and it's difficult because we don't want to be in the position of subsidizing private parties utilizing our facilities as well. But we also recognize that we have, particularly with the Orpheum, we do have some duty that this has been a theater that has been available to on a reasonable basis to our partners to provide a public good for the community as well. So we see the broader context, but we don't also see that going down this road with trying to get to break even net operating profits should be done so by really getting away from that viewpoint that we still have there's a public good component to what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense, because that's what the third penny is intended for, is to provide that public, and that's been the policy in the past, is that the third penny was really there to I don't know, backstop is probably the right term, so that we can do things that can't necessarily pay for themselves but make our community a better place. It's what we do with all taxes, is that we come together as a group to provide those things for our community as a group, or a collective of citizens that come together to support things we believe in and things that are important to our community. And that's where I'm concerned. The arena is an additional example that we knock it down, then we eliminate some affordable space in our community. The arena the last consulting group that came through, their opinion is that for a couple of million, we make some improvements and it becomes affordable. And that it's a different group of people that are able to do it. Rather than maximizing the profit, it's what's good for the community as much as it is what's going to make the most amount of money. And so there are a number of nonprofit groups that use the arena over the course of the year that can't afford to be in the convention center, that can't afford to be in the Denny, can't be able to do some of those. And so we knock it down and build more expensive space. We eliminate nonprofits that do different things, whether it's a group like Family Connection that I've been part of in the past, or running events and triathlons and just different things where we're now eliminating really inexpensive space to be able to continue on to do good things for our community, in the other hand of trying to raise as much revenue as possible. So I'm good.
Councilor Neitzer?
Well, we do have a reserve policy. What would you think of us devising and amending our resolution to have an entertainment tax reserve policy?
I think that that could be open for discussion. I mean, we can sit down and kind of flesh through what makes the most sense for that, for what that policy could be. Because I think we have the shared goal to make sure that that's a sustainable fund going forward. So.
Yeah, I think that's something that's worth discussing. This is slightly off topic, but in the entertainment tax, it's not an enterprise. However, what we try to do is with a lot of these venues, the entertainment tax is paying for both sides, the operating and the capital. This is jumping ahead, but it just came to me and I want to forget it. For the transit fund, does the transit fund, is that paying both sides as well?
It does. We do make a, I believe it's a $250,000 transfer. It's $750 annually from the sales and use tax fund into the transit fund to help on the capital side. And that was done primarily when some of the federal cutbacks occurred and we weren't receiving the same amount of federal money to support those capital expenditures. But you're correct. It is exactly the same. It is both operating and capital.
Okay, so you take money from the second penny, you transfer it into transit, and then you buy a bus out of the fund.
Correct. And it's one time, it's in every year, and it's part of the capital program. If you look under the transfer line, that's the one transfer. Correct me if I'm stating anything correctly there, Tim, but it's fair.
And then finally, I think it's, and Councilor Sale could probably chime in, but in watching it, it's clear that what's going to happen is they're going to have, and I've heard them talk about it, their charge is not to define how to do it or what it's going to cost or come up with anything. They're just going to have kind of overarching recommendations, as in like, you should expand the convention center, or you should eventually look to move the baseball stadium or something like that. But they're not getting into, okay, here's a building plan, here's how you can do it, and here's how much it's going to cost. It's going to be up to us to decide between the administration and the council, do we want to appropriate money to take the next step? For example, like if they say maybe you should mothball and tear down the arena, do we want to explore that and find out, okay, how much would it cost to tear it down? How much would it cost to keep it going? And then we have to do that due diligence. And we also have the power to just take the report and put it on a shelf. It's really all in our control. It's just basically their recommendations, that it's not binding, or it's a task force. Fair?
Councilor Sale?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to public input. If anybody has anything on any of the topics today. Okay, looks like we're good. We will adjourn. Thank you.